Right. Good evening, members, officers, and members of the public, and welcome to planning meeting today. Okay, can I request everybody to put their phones on silent or switch them off, please? Members, please do not use the phone during the meeting. Right. Item 1, apologies for absence.
So we've received apologies for Councillor Nagra
Okay,
and everyone else is here.
thank you. Declaration of interest. Members, I think we all had emails on both items, and I also have a phone call there.
Chair,
Yep.
just to add on this item, I've also met with the developers with Officer of Planning.
I was at that meeting as well.
Thank you for that. Minutes of the meeting held on 13th of April. I'll take both correction and matter arising together. It's on page 7 to page 10. Anybody? Agreed? I'll sign that now, yeah? This one, yeah. So we all had late report as well. Oh, she's here now. Good. It's a full house, yeah. Okay, item 4, Madison House, Commerce Road, and who's taking it? Matthew?
That's correct, Councillor.
All
That's me.
yours, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Matthew Rees. I'm the Head of Development Management, and I'll be presenting this item tonight. So this is Madison House on Commerce Road. First of all, I'll try and show you exactly where it is. So we're in the Brentford area. We are about 150 metres west of Brentford High Street. You can see the application site outlined in red there. It's on Commerce Road. You may not know Commerce Road. It's got a lot of development activity, but it's a cul-de-sac off London Road. I'll show you this aerial view, but I don't think that's particularly helpful. It looks very cluttered. So I've got this slide, which I'm hoping is a bit more helpful. Madison House is, it consists of the 2 long buildings and the kind of L-shaped building central to the slide there. Just to the east side of Commerce Road, you'll see the Brentford Lock Rest redevelopment, which is it's coming through in 3 stages. Stages 1 and 2 are complete. So that's on the right-hand side, just to the left of the canal. And the stage 3 is the vacant site to the far right, towards the top of that slide there. That's a development between 7 to 10 stories tall, the latest phase. You can also see 1 Commerce Road, which on this slide is actually it's under construction. It's now been completed. That's up to 7 stories as well. And then also of importance to this application, or I understand of importance to some residents in the borough, is there's the disused railway embankment, which is the green strip of land running to the left of Commerce Road. I'll actually flick back to this slide. Just to the left of the red outline, you can see the embankment. That's proposed to be an area of public parkland. Under consideration at the moment, not part of this planning application, but of pertinence to this, perhaps with pertinence to these discussions. Moving on to the proposal, it's an application for 111 flats and 2,388 square metres of commercial floor space. That's for light industrial research and development. It's over 7 to 9 stories, and it contains 3 blue barge parking spaces. So this is a photo that we're looking at the moment. It's at the bottom of Commerce Road, looking up towards the application site. So on the left-hand side is Bridge House. That's going to be of importance because I understand people, there are speakers who are representing that site tonight. And then straight ahead of straight middle of the slide is the first part of Madison House, but I'll go through that in a bit more detail because it's shown here. So you can see the redevelopment on the right hand side. Madison House, this is one of the 2 long buildings to the southern side of the site. Again, Bridge House is on the left hand side. Bridge House is an MOT centre. Again, you'll hear representations on that. Moving up along northwards along Commerce Road to your left hand side, Madison House. And then this is the second part of Madison House. This is the L-shaped building. So Madison House is at the moment kind of split into 2 story buildings. One side is offices and the other side it's storage, car storage. This slide is looking back towards one of the longer buildings again. So the person taking the photos is stood on the eastern side of Commerce Road, looking back towards Manderson House. And now we're further north, looking back down towards Manderson House. And on the right hand side, you can see the commercial office building. The commercial building just to the north of Manderson House. And then this is a view from the northern side, looking back down. And again, application site from the other side of the road. So this is the existing site plan. Again, you can see the site split into two main parts, the two longer buildings on the southern side, the L-shaped building to the north. And this is what it looks like is existing. So two-story buildings, currently vacant. So this is the ground floor plan. So what you'll see proposed here is shared parts, 3 vehicle parking spaces, the disabled bays to the top left-hand side of the proposed building. And then you've got the commercial space at ground floor. The commercial place is on ground floor and first floor. So we actually skipped that slide, but there's commercial over 2 stories. One of them's a mezzanine floor. And then this is the bottom floor of the residential, which starts on the 3rd floor. Sorry if it's getting a bit complicated. But this slide's quite important because it shows you where the communal amenity space is. So it sits on top of the commercial section in between these two main sections of buildings. These are the residential properties. So that's a podium floor plan. And then as I flick through, you'll be seeing the residential properties as you move up through the building. So this is stories 2 to 5. And then this is proposed sixth story. So you'll see one of the buildings terminates at this level, and you can see there's amenity space on the top floor. Moving up again, level 7, amenity space at top floor, and then the roof plan. So you can see what you're looking now is you're looking down on the rooftop amenity space and the amenity area central to between the two podiums. This is an elevation. So this is the east elevation. So this is what you see fronting onto Commerce Road. North elevation, because these are pure elevations, they're obviously needed for the applications, but they do look at, this isn't quite what they would look like. I'll go on to the CGI shortly. West elevation, so this is from the side of where the High Line is, the raised embankment is. South elevation, and then, some CGIs. So this is broadly what it would look like as you stood on Commerce Road. Again, so this is now the junction with Commerce London Road, looking up with the Holiday Inn on the right-hand side. So you see Bridge House, the MET Centre, to the left of that slide, and then you can see the proposed Manderson House building a little bit further up, and there's a bigger image of it. And there is a visual looking from the top down. So very, very broadly, it's a strategic industrial location. So that is land that is important to the industrial function of the borough. Notwithstanding that, this is a vacant site. They are re-providing commercial floor space, and there is an uplift in commercial floor space. Then there's residential on top. So residential supports the commercial floor space at ground and first floor level. And then obviously 111 units does contribute to the housing need in the borough. There is a conservation area to the south of this, the Grand Union Canal and Boston Manor Conservation Area, which borders Commerce Road just to the south of the site. And I think that's broadly it, but I will go back to find a slide, sorry, just to show this relationship between Bridge House and Manderson House, if that's okay, because you're going to hear representation suggesting that Bridge House has got capacity for new dwellings, and they're concerned that the proposed scheme is sterilising the site just to the south, but I'll leave that bit to representations if that's okay and conclude there, Councillor.
Thank you, Matthew. I'll ask the first question. It's been brought to my notice that there are some windows facing the next building. How is it going to affect the next building, and how far is it from that building? What's the distance between those two?
Sure, that was a bit I was going to leave the speaker, sorry, but I will cover it in briefly now. So as you look at this slide, that's the southern elevation of Manderson House. There you go, there's a proposed south elevation. The windows in the middle of that south elevation, starting from the 3rd floor, not the first level of residential accommodation, starting from the 2nd level of residential accommodation upwards. Those are single aspect units that look out south. So that's the sole windows serving these homes, which look out onto Bridge House to the southern side of the site. So the concern is that were Bridge House to come forward with residential development, it would essentially be blocking these windows and therefore resulting in loss of light to these windows, which would impact on their opportunity to provide housing themselves. So that's what concerns are. You'll hear some cases shortly as part of the representations, and then I'll cover it in a bit more detail then, if that's okay.
Thank you. Members, questions for Matthew? Yeah, Councillor Bowling.
I think you probably know what my questions are going to be, considering I submitted them for the last meeting. Do you want to just go through them, or do you want me to ask you them?
Oh, would you want to? Are you okay to ask them again? Sorry,
Yeah.
I think I know what they're going to be.
So the knotweed. Can you just break down what is there a knotweed management eradication plan? What's the kind of cast iron guarantee for future residents?
Yes, there is. So that would form part of the. It was included in the ecology statement. There is a planning condition that would require the removal of what from the site before progressing. So that's the ecology condition, which I don't know what the number is. Sorry, but it's in there.
Is that different to a management and eradication plan, or is it the same thing?
That would be a plan to manage and eradicate the knotweed. Yes.
Okay. The One Commerce Road, directly opposite the Holiday Inn. On the top of the Holiday Inn, there's a industrial extractor fan. And as I understand it, the extractor fan wasn't picked up in the noise assessment for One Commerce Road because you only notice it on the top floor where the extractor fan is directly facing you, and you couldn't get, it was just done at street level because the noise isn't noticeable at street level, it's sort of directed. And so someone has, I think they bought it off plan, they moved in, came up to their balcony and got this noise like a jumbo jet. I don't know if the extractor fan would affect Manderson House, but has there been any analysis of that, or what we can be able to do if, when it's built, we discover there's this huge noise for those top floor flats as well?
Sorry, appreciate this was pointed out to us before. What they found as a result of their noise survey was the loudest impact was coming from aeroplanes going over the site and from car traffic along London Road. So essentially what that meant was that they were having to insulate against that. So I think you suggested an elegant solution of, can we mitigate the noise from the Holiday Inn? They had to mitigate against the louder noise sensitive premises. So that's how they've designed the properties to ensure that it's protected against the louder noise sources.
But the problem is the noise is not apparent from the ground floor. The noise is only apparent when you are up at that height because the extractor fan.
I understand that point, but they did measure up to 83 decibels as part of their noise survey because it's right next to the MOT centre where the flight craft gone over. So it does seem quite unlikely that, as loud as it would be, as noise diminishes as you move further away from the source of the noise, that it's going to be louder than the noise sensitives they picked up, which was noisy. They found it to be a noisy area, but it would seem highly unlikely that this source of noise would be worse than what they picked up as part of their noise survey.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Sprout up.
Thanks, Matthew. I noticed from the notes that there's almost just short of 2,500 square meters of commercial space, which is to go on the ground floor. Have we got any clue what that might or might? Is it going to be possibly retail, industrial, office? And depending on the nature of it, what I can't see is I can see the parking, etc., particularly for bikes, which is very, very welcome, obviously. But deliveries and any parking or whatever for people using the commercial facilities, is there a proposal? How's that being dealt with?
Sure, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. So what is proposed at the ground and first floor level is Class E. That's no help at all. Sorry, it's a very wide-ranging class, but we've restricted it to, as part of conditions, to light industrial. So light industrial, by definition, is what's compatible with residential use at the same time, with certain mitigations and kind of research and development. So that kind of industry is what's proposed there. I'm going to pass you over to my transport planners, if that's okay.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, we will be securing a full delivery and servicing plan with this. Essentially, they will be outlining, showing how the largest vehicle will be able to enter and exit the site in forward gear via the access road, and showing where all refuse collection points will be taken from as well.
Yeah, because obviously until we know what the type of commercial use is, it may generate a little or a lot of rubbish, particularly if it was maybe a restaurant or something, or it could be something that requires a lot of deliveries. So one assumes that there's enough flexibility within the plan to accommodate all types of refuse collection and or delivery?
Yeah, well, because we're not fully aware of the end user at this point, we aren't able to clarify that at this point. But we will be seeking input from the end user within that delivery and servicing plan, so we can understand the needs then.
Okay. Councillor Todd?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Matthew, on page 19, there's comments about the objection, bulk scale and massing of the development. And you asked people to read paragraph 891 to 8113, sorry about my throat. But on page 22, we have a remarkable situation that Brentford Voice is very much against it and is very graphic about the failures, and yet asked to be the £15,000 to be considered as when it goes through. I'll find that a slight contradiction, but I'm concerned that your suggested read of paragraphs 891 and to 8113 doesn't adequately address the bulk scale of massing. I think there is a case to consider that. They do look high, they do look out of scale. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to that, if I could.
Thank you, Councillor. So they are tall buildings. This is an area. It's not an allocated site, but it is not. It's an area that has got tall buildings that have been previously approved along Brentford Lot West. What I would say is that they've spent quite a lot of time and effort in the designing of the scheme to break up the massing and bulk. So you can see from the slide in front of me that they have got the recessed top floor, which is obviously a different colour to try and make it appear more subservient to the building. They've broken up the blocks, so they've done so by creating two different blocks to try and reduce the massing as it appears from the street scene. So there's certain design features that they've introduced to try and reduce that massing and bulk. But obviously the bottom line is that we're trying to maximise reasonable amount of housing on a site within reasonable parameters, and trying to establish what the harm of that height is. We don't believe it's there. We believe it's fairly consistent with, sorry, fairly, that's not the right word to use, but consistent with approvals in the area. It's been designed in a manner that's positive, that addresses these particular issues. And there are no heritage assets that are severely impacted on as part of this scheme. So that's the reason it's got the positive recommendation in design terms.
My final question is, there's mention in the report of the Hounslow design panel, but it doesn't say what that panel conclusion came to. And then in the Brentford Voice submission, there's mention of an applicant's overheating report on page 23. Can you tell us what that is, please?
So as they're obliged to discuss overheating as part of the climate change mitigation. So obviously changing environment, they get warmer. We need to make sure that the units aren't too hot. So they have got dual aspect units, which allows for free flow of air, and then the single aspect units use mechanical ventilation for cooling.
Do you mind, Chair? One quick one. Yeah. With that tremendous summer we had last year, lots of people said there was too much glass in modern day flats. Are you adjusting to climate change in the department?
That's a slightly more wide range question. Yes, we are. You will shortly, hopefully. Sorry, Vincent, I'm talking for our spatial planning team at the moment. See a new climate change supplementary planning document which refers to all of these issues. But we are broadly happy that they're addressing this as part of the application as well.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Like all of us, we've all received several emails and so on. This looks very impressive. Can you please show me where it joins the other person's property next to it?
So I'm going to go to the east elevation fronting Commerce Road. So you can see to the left of the proposed building there. So that's the relationship between the two. And if I go back up to the site plan, sorry, this is the proposed ground floor plan. So now we're looking to the bottom right of that picture. So Bridge House adjoins the site, and then you can see this modest setback at the proposed line of the building. So that's the relationship between the two. I'm not sure if I've got a better visual representation of that, sorry, but you can see there's a relatively modest amount of separation distance. If I go back to the photos, sorry for jumping around a little bit, you could probably get a feeling for what that separation is between the two. So we're looking at a broadly consistent building line, so you can see that they are quite close. Is that helpful? Sorry, Councillor.
Is it set back in any way, or is it on the land of the developer?
No. So if I show you, this is the site plan as existing. So you can see there's barely any setback in the existing situation. And then there's the proposed plan. So it does have a marginally greater setback, but not a significant one, that's fair to say.
Would that affect the other person who
So-
may want to build later on?
So as it
With the
stands,
windows and all that.
as it stands, it's an MOT garage, so there isn't any issues in terms of loss of light outlet. There's no residential properties on there as it stands. So the concerns that you're hearing is whether it prevents the residential scheme coming forward in the future. And as I say, I'm happy to talk about that. I was going to let people make representations and put their case before coming back on those, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Luki?
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. Is this within height policy for this area? And can you indicate where the other similar tall buildings are in the area? I do recall when we gave permission for the bus garage site by the railway line, we did allow a taller building there, but that's the only one that I recognise here in that description. It's not been built yet, has it? It has been.
Sorry, Councillor, I'll speak. Yeah, so the only 10-storey aspect there is the on the Brentford Lot West. It's right next to the railway line. So that was in 2018. It was approved 10 stories on that site. Yeah, you're correct to say. Hopefully, it was covered in reasonable detail in the report. Policies, the local plan policy in 2015 suggests tall buildings restricted to town centres. This isn't a town centre. The London plan seeks to take a plan-led approach to tall buildings by allocating sites and such for tall buildings, and this isn't an allocated site at the same time. So there is a modest departure, which we're trying to suggest is mitigated by what has happened on Brentford Lot West, design of the scheme, and the need for housing. So yeah, you're correct. There's a minor departure from what's said within the plan.
Sorry, please describe that minor departure. Is it? Yeah, I asked you what's the tallest buildings in existence that exists at the moment, or with planning permission, and I mentioned that one at the end there, but that is right up against a railway line and hidden by the green. It's on the curve of Hazel Close. So what is the tallest building here? What is permitted? What is the permitted policy here? Tall buildings.
So outside the town centre, west of the town centre, the tallest permitted building is the 10 stories. I think One Commerce Road, the one which is opposite the site, that was up to 7 stories. And then I believe, so I haven't checked in detail, but I'm looking at the plans at the moment. I believe it was 6 to 7 stories on Brentford Lot West. So just to reiterate, 2000 local plan policy, tall buildings in town centres is where they were directed. Obviously, they increased the housing numbers pursuant to 2015, which forced a rethink of the tall buildings policy. The London plan policy suggests a plan-led approach to establishing where tall buildings can go. This is not allocated site, so it doesn't have that plan-led process. So you're correct to point out that there is a kind of a departure from what the policies say. But as I say, on the basis of the design of the scheme, the character of the area, the need for housing, this is a central location. It's near a high street. It's accessible location. We're suggesting this is a reasonable place to have the housing, and that isn't a sustainable ground for refusing the scheme.
Just one more, Chair, if that's all right. The former railway on the embankment there. How far away would should this get permission? How far away would that be? Would that be built from the embankment there, backing onto Field Lane?
So hopefully this is a fair, sorry, you're right, I mentioned at the start of the presentation. So what they're doing is they're safeguarding access to this embankment. Sorry, I know you didn't ask that question, but then I also failed to do it as part of my presentation, sorry. It's on that slide there. It's the green area in the slide just to the southwest of the proposed building to the bottom of that slide. So it's right adjacent to it.
Sorry, so how would that inhibit, how could that inhibit the light there onto, will you have a dark park there, potentially?
So you can see that the proposed units, so the short ends of the buildings are the ones that face onto the embankment, and then those are dual aspect units there. So then there would maybe a degree of obstruction, but they've got clear views to the north and south, the units that are on those corners. So there's overall they've passed the light tests that we apply to them.
Sorry, Chair, I was thinking about the park users rather than the developers' marketing.
Sorry, so I mean, as it stands, it's an unused embankment, so it's very difficult to apply much weight to what's proposed to happen there, whether or not that's actually going to come forward. But notwithstanding that, overlooking of a park isn't unusual. That's something that generally is positively encouraged for natural surveillance. So that in itself wouldn't be a reason for objecting to the scheme.
Okay, Badgers can't object, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, Councillor Bowring again, yeah, go.
Thank you, Chair. So Matthew, a few things on the Highline. So they're contributing £15,000 and a 15,000 something pounds towards the access point to the proposed Highline. Is that right?
Yeah, so they're proposing to retain that access point. So just to be clear, the Highline isn't. Sorry, you know this better than me, but for the benefit of a lot of people know, the Highline isn't an established proposal yet. It's still out to consultation, is my understanding. So to use it as a material planning consideration is difficult in this situation. But what we've asked them to do is safeguard access to it in the event of it coming forward. So what they've contributed to part of this is that the access route to the north side of the buildings. If I can just hopefully get a plan showing where it would be, but that's possibly the best view there. So just to the north of the buildings, which is to the bottom left-hand side of the slide, is the access. There's quite a wide access route that we're retaining to the potential Highline.
And so that's secured as a public right of way in perpetuity.
Yeah, so that would be secured as a right of way. Yes, I haven't used the term public right of way, but it will be. We will retain that access point.
How did we get to the figure of £15,078, whatever it is, for the contribution towards the access to the Highline?
Yeah, councillors, I don't have the automatic answer to that, other than it was something that was requested by presumably our Parks team who have knowledge of this and secured through the Section 106 agreement. So that would have been part of the discussions. Thank you, councillor.
Okay, Councillor Bowring.
There you go, yeah.
And then the final one is can we be certain that, you know, you've got the podium, which is right next to the Highline. Can we be certain that there'd be no private access to that in the future, to the Highline from the podium?
Yeah, we could. I mean, we could do that. Yes, we could secure that through a condition if you seen fit to do that. But you do that through the boundary treatment condition. We can amend it if you see fit. So yeah, if you were to resolve to grant the scheme, then please by all means recommend that further condition.
Thank you.
Councillor William.
Hi, Matthew. Just a quick one on viability. I get the impression looking at the scheme that viability has played a big part in why it's the size it is and why it doesn't comply on affordable and a whole bunch of other things. What can you tell us about the viability assessment that's been done and how that's shaped our thinking on why you've recommended approval and what tests there are in there to claw back affordable in the future, hopefully?
Hopefully is the word. Yeah, so they submitted a viability assessment for the scheme, so it doesn't achieve the 40% affordable housing that we're looking for. It was, sorry, I've got the numbers here. So it's 21 affordable rented, 30 affordable homes overall, which is a shortfall, I think, of 8%. So yeah, there was a viability assessment that's submitted to us. We got it reviewed by an independent assessor who agreed that this is maximum viable amount for their scheme. But what I would add is that we then entered into negotiations about the type of affordable housing that was coming forward. Sorry, there's no housing officer here tonight, but what they would tell you is that they were quite pleased to secure the large social rented units, the 4-bedroom social rented units. So if we were to just take the figures, we could have improved what you were looking at tonight by saying more than 27% affordable homes. That number's been reduced upon our request for the larger 4-bedroom units to be social rented. So it doesn't look great when you just look at the pure statistics, but our housing team entered into negotiations to try and make it work for us.
So you're saying it's a larger amount of affordable housing in terms of per habitable room, or whatever the other measure is?
That's another way of putting it. Yes, that's fair to say.
Okay, Councillor Bowring again. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, very quickly, could you just remind me where we are in terms of compliance on the shared amenity space?
So it exceeds amenity space requirements because of the rooftop amenity space and the podium amenity space. It's got more than our policies require, which is actually a rare thing, I can say to you.
Okay, I can't see any more hands. Thank you, Matthew. Now, can I ask the objector, Dan Osborne, please? Mr. Osborne, you'll have 5 minutes and we will remind you when 30 seconds left. Yeah.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you. Good evening. My name's Daniel Osborne, a director in Boyer Planning's London office. I advise the owners of the adjoining site to the immediate south of the application site, MP Motors, also known as Bridge House. MP Motors is designated as an industrial use along with the same land uses as this application site. It is currently a car repair workshop with ancillary offices. The owners of the MP Motors site do not object to the principle of the redevelopment and have no quarrel with the developer of promoting this development adjoining my client's site. Indeed, they welcome the development in principle. We agree it makes very good use of the land for a mix of commercial and residential uses, and we support the development as generally sought. However, we very strongly consider the application must be refused in its current form due to the prejudicial impact of residential windows directly overlooking our site with a distance of around 1.5 metres. The presence of these windows, which would serve approximately 17 households, may prejudice the ongoing use of the MP Motor site for its current industrial purposes and would certainly prejudice intensification of the MP Motor site for mixed use. The development clearly conflicts with policies D3 and D13 of the London Plan, which seek to ensure, in summary, that all sites are optimised and that existing industrial sites are protected and able to operate successfully without risk of their operations being fettered due to noise or other complaints from new residential development. This is the agent of change principle in policy D13 of the London Plan. We have submitted 3 objections to the development, but they have not been properly understood or addressed in the officer's report. Number 1, that the proposed development at Manderson House would prejudice the continued use of MP Motors for current lawful designated SIL use or other industrial uses. Number 2, that the proposed development of Manderson House would prejudice future intensification of the MP Motor site for other potential industrial uses in line with its designation as SIL. The proposals therefore clearly conflict with London Plan policies D13 and D3. And number 3, that the proposed development of Manderson House would prejudice future mixed-use development due to impacts on daylight and amenity. The proposals therefore clearly conflict with London Plan policy D3. We also understand the applicant has prepared and submitted a further daylight assessment relating to my client's site, which officers have advised that they do not have permission to share with us. In the realms of public decision making, this is rather odd and potentially unlawful. As an update on my client's MP Motor site, we have had a formal pre-application meeting which was held on the 29th of April 2003, and the current scheme proposes a reprovision of 800 square metres of commercial floor space and 58 homes. The principles were discussed with officers, and it was agreed that despite the site's designation of SIL, officers are satisfied that mixed-use development, including residential, is acceptable as a matter of land use principle. Should the Council's Planning Committee tonight resolve to grant planning permission for the redevelopment of Manderson House, which includes habitable room windows on its southern boundary facing our pre-app site, our client's proposals would be unacceptable due to impacts on daylight, sunlight, outlook and sense of enclosure. By approving this application, this would reduce the delivery of dwellings being able to be delivered on our site by 75%. This is a reduction from 58 units to 14, which is the loss of 44 homes, which your officers have said are much needed in the borough. I'm amazed that officers have recommended this application for approval in its current form. We therefore seek that the application must be refused for the reasons outlined.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Members got questions for Mr. Osborne? Yeah, Councillor Bowling.
Hi, thanks for that. Agent change has come up a fair bit this year in the committee, and we've looked at it quite a bit. It's a very interesting principle. But as I've understood agent of change, it's about existing use and then the agent of change, the person bringing change. You seem to be interpreting it or applying it or understanding it in a different way. You're not talking about an existing use, you're talking about a potential existing use. When I read through the agent of change principle, I can't really see in there about how that works forwards. Do you want to just unpack that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, firstly, we've got an existing use that is on site that is in line with the SIL allocation and its use for employment. And so I think the first point is that we wouldn't want anything to prejudice that. I think what we're looking at in this part of town is that things are coming forward, things are changing, and the provision of housing linked with the reprovision of employment is clearly something that, you know, there is appetite for by the council. And I think overall, the proposals on Manderson House would prejudice and preclude any further development happening moving forward.
Yeah, just to help us, is it possible to get the view up that shows that particular impact that the objector is referring to? I don't know which one best illustrates your.
I think it's the one. Go forward a bit. It's that one. I think the one back.
One back.
Yeah.
So you're this red. Your client is the back of this red brick building that's immediately on the crossroads. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're worried about is the windows, which, if my geography is right, on the southern elevation, looking directly.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So it's the south going to the north of our site, and because the proposals are right up until the red line, the building line, it gives a very narrow gap that would preclude any development coming forward on our site effectively, that would make most efficient use of the land.
Okay, yeah, but coming back, and maybe I didn't understand you, but I wasn't totally convinced with your answer to the previous question from the councillor. I think I understand the agent of change. If that was to ultimately prevent your client's business running effectively, that's something we might want to look at. But to say that it would then stop that business developing or stop that site being reused for other industrial purposes, I mean, I think we could ask our lawyer where we stand on the agent of change principle there, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't think it applies in this case. We've got, as been stated in the report, you haven't got an alternative planning application in front of you. You got an existing building and use that officer is saying will not be affected by the planning application that's in front of you. So I'm not certain. What you need to consider is whether that's defendable at any planning appeal, and I don't see that being the case.
So if you don't mind, Madam, sorry, Councillor. So I don't want to put words in the speaker's mouth here, but this is a strategic industrial location. It's a site that's important for industry. So whereas the agent of change principle strictly may not apply here, I think they're just making a case that we need industry. It should go in this location. Therefore, we shouldn't be stopping the expansion of their properties for future industrial uses. And yes, if we were to receive a planning application for an extremely noisy industry use in this location, then that would perhaps be refused because there's flat right next door to it. So that's kind of the interpretation of the agent of change principle I think it's been presented. Sorry, I hope that's okay to say.
Yes,
I have an answer to that as well, but notwithstanding that, I think that's the case. So I wouldn't strictly look at the interpretation of agent of change, read into the principle of this is SIL, this should be, according to policy, kept safeguarded for industrial use. Therefore, they may want to develop for industrial use. This is the location for it.
Understood, but I mean, correct me, but you can't protect that from an unknown industrial use. I mean, you could end up, someone could decide to put a great big scrapyard on there with a steel crushing smelting plant, which clearly would be unacceptable to people even more than, you know, sort of 200 or 300 meters away, let alone 1 meter. So we can't effectively give it an open-ended check, if you like, for future planning. Is it because that's what it sounds like we're asking for?
So yeah, you're broadly interpreting what our case is. Notwithstanding that, also we're taking the SIL as a whole. So this SIL is struggling; it's not functioning particularly well. Manderson House is part of the SIL. As part of this proposal, we'll be getting 2-story of industrial uses, which will hope bring the use of the site back into it. So we're suggesting broadly overall, the SIL is actually going to be improved as part of this, whether or not the proposed site is compromised. And as Jimmy says, we've got no evidence that any application is going to be forthcoming for an industrial use here that may be acceptable otherwise. So we're taking that kind of overall look at the SIL and how this is positive for it.
Yeah, which was going to be my supplementary. I mean, clearly the site's been not being used for car storage. It's not an overwhelmingly productive industrial site. This, as I read it, this site is actually going to offer greater potential for a wider mix of commercial and light industrial purposes. So it's actually improving the site, not necessarily preventing further development.
That's a view, isn't it? Sorry, councillor. So I'll leave it at the view section if that's okay.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, do you mind if I just kind of add to that? I think the point that we're trying to make is that, you know, all sites need to be optimized, and these proposals do not allow our site that is currently underused for industrial purposes to come forward for any other form of development, because once you've got you know, dwellings that are right up against the boundary, you know, it's going to be very difficult to get planning permission for something that is a more intensive use of the site.
Councillor Todd?
Yeah, thanks very much. You advised us to refuse the whole application. Have you been in dialogue with the developer?
Very good question. My client has tried to contact the developer because they're very willing to bring something together that works for both sites, that is designed in a way that actually works for everybody. We were never invited to any of the consultation events by the applicant. We were never served notice formally of the planning application, and we've also written to the planning consultant to make contact, but we've never heard anything from them. You know, my client's really willing to kind of work together to do something that is comprehensive and optimizes both sites, but we've never had any traction with them.
But I want to come back. You want us to refuse the whole thing just for that apparently minor area next to your site?
No, in its current form, our view is that it does not conform with planning policy, and it doesn't propose something that optimizes the opportunity for both of these sites to come forward. And having those habitable rooms kind of overlooking our site at 1.5 meters would prejudice anything else happening next door.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Luki?
Thank you. Look, can you just clarify? Yeah, my car had an MOT at this place earlier this year, and it passed. So it is actually being used. It's not vacant. It's not underused. It's used as an MOT testing station, and there's car work going on there. So yeah, clarify that for the committee, because I think maybe the impression is that it's not being used, and it's and they're waiting on, your client is waiting on an opportunity to develop it. The thing about what's that? What were we talking about earlier? Protecting the agent of change. You remember we approved the Heidelberg site not long ago, and we looked at mitigation for the based on that policy of agent for change. You might not remember, but other members of the committee do, and we so it's about mitigation. If you've got however many flats that are going to be put on that site next door, what's to prevent them, what's not to prevent them complaining about the noise from the MOT. So agent of change works both ways, doesn't it? It doesn't work. It doesn't. Maybe you can confirm that. Yeah, I'll put that as a question. So there's been, can you just confirm, has there been absolutely no discussion with the applicant about between your client and the developers there? And if there was to be discussion, to what extent could both sites be enhanced to meet the policy of increased housing in the borough?
Yeah, sure. I'm told by my client that there have been no discussions. I can only speak for Boyer Planning in terms of what we've done, and we've written to the planning consultant, and we haven't had any response, despite trying to get traction. what can be done, we think, is that both developers can work together to be able to achieve the replacement of commercial floor space, so it meets all the SIL requirements, as well as delivering much needed housing on both sites. As I've said, that if this fetters our site, we're going to lose 44 units, and in the wider context of the 111, I think, that are proposed on the applicant site, that there is a scheme that can be developed, and our architects have looked at it. They're not here, and I'm not an architect, so I'm not going to go into what layouts can be done and what design can be done, but I understand that there is an efficient scheme that can be done if both developers work together.
Sorry, just just a couple more. So, you mentioned that there has been some pre-planning discussion with the council. How far have you got with that? And also, say there's something that's not being shared. What do you suspect that might be that's not being shared?
Yes, thank you. So we submitted a pre-app request, a formal request, a few weeks ago, and there was a meeting last week with Matthew, with my colleagues, and I gave a summary of what was discussed. So we're in the process of engaging with your officers to develop a scheme in order to submit a planning application over the summer. Your second question was about the report that wasn't available. We understood that additional evidence was put in by the applicant that included a further daylight assessment, and we requested a copy of that on the basis that all planning application documents should be in the public realm, and the public should be made aware, and it should be made available. And we were told that the report can't be made available, which I quite frankly found shocking, especially on the eve of planning committee.
Okay, and Matthew will answer that later on, yeah? Okay, any more? Yeah, Councillor Boring first.
So it's just in the last couple of weeks that your client's been talking to the planning department.
In formal terms, yes. As part of the formal pre-app process, where you get formal feedback in the meeting, and then you get written advice following up.
So I guess what I'm just wanting to understand is, this application's been in play for some time. I met with the developers last year, and obviously the conversations with officers would have precluded that. Your client's been on that site for decades. Is it just a fluke that this has happened, that the moment he's decided it's sort of coinciding within weeks of this planning application? Why didn't he try and do it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 months ago? What do you think about that?
I can't answer in terms of years, but in terms of being notified of what was happening next door, there was no notification given, both formally or from a neighbourhood kind of consultation point of view from the applicant from Anderson House. Ideally, we would have liked to have got involved way earlier, but because of circumstance, it hasn't been able to happen. And, when we did first get wind of it, my client, tried to get in contact with the developer, and it's just fallen on deaf ears.
I'm trying to understand why, you're saying your client wants to develop the site. Why now? Is it because Madison House is coming forward? Why didn't he try and do it 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Brentford Lock West, the whole area has been developing. Why now? Why is it, 3 weeks before we're being asked to make a decision, suddenly?
I'm afraid I can't answer that. I'm the planning consultant. I don't know what the strategy has been. I don't know if it's because of tenancies. I don't know if it's because of business strategy, whether or not it's to do with funding.
Did your client not think it might be a wise idea to come tonight?
Any more questions?
Sorry, I don't think we also got a proper answer on the agent of change. Is the agent of change for existing uses, or can it be used for potential future uses?
Yeah, it was introduced for existing uses. So it was introduced as a result of a number of concerns being raised that people were building houses next to nightclubs. Nightclubs had to shut down because.
Can it be used for potential future uses?
So my understanding is that that's not the intention of the policy, but I am also suggesting, because you do have to consider it to a certain extent because the allocation is SIL. There is that issue there. Sorry, I'll try and clarify further during my section.
This gentleman raised his hand to answer a question. Members are happy him to question, just answer the question, not a speech. Are you happy with that? Yes. Okay, yeah. Sir, you can come forward and
Thank you, Chair.
just answer the question, please, not a speech.
Yes, so this gentleman, Paul.
Are you going to answer that? Just answer
Shall I
that
just
question,
give-
please.
shall I
No,
just
no
give a bit of an
speech.
explanation on who
No.
we are and.
Yeah, go on.
Who's,
Yeah,
who's,
Okay.
the question was directed towards the owner of the
This is
property.
the owner of the property.
Okay, what
He's
I
been
would-
there for many, many years and is
So-
approaching retirement. So
So I'd just like to understand why now, so close.
The main thing is, I was running my business up to now. I was running my business up to now. And ultimately, I need to make sure that I have enough funds, because the way I understand the law there, because if you running the business as a employment site, you can't just overnight change it to resident. They have to be closed down for some period of time to show the council by law. That's what I've been told. Okay, is it have to be closed down for certain time. You can't run the business there anymore. So it becomes a resident. So but I haven't got funds enough to close the place down for 6 months or a year. And or speak to somebody and saying, okay, I'll sell it and developer can take over.
and I think the retirement point is
Yes,
relevant as
now
well.
it's
You're
about-
approaching retirement.
I am coming to the retirement. I hurt myself now. Is a stage comes to it. I'll make a use of the.
Thank you. That answers
That's
my
good.
question.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Mr. Osman, you can come back, please. Yeah, thank you. I think Mr. Councillor Williams got a question for the objector. Yeah?
I think Dan did a pretty good job of getting at what I was going to get at. Obviously, you're a planning consultant for a living. Are you confident that this objection, if it was to succeed here at planning committee tonight, would stand up at the planning inspector at all? On if it was appealed?
Yes, I do. And I think there's also some legal challenge points there as well, which includes not being served notice correctly by the council and also not being allowed to view additional submitted information in support of the planning application that officers wouldn't release. So I think there's a very strong chance at appeal. And I also think that there is a legal challenge 2 points as well.
Thank you. We'll come back to Matthew to clarify on those later.
Thank you. Councillor Lal?
Chair, I'd just like to touch upon what has been said earlier about you being precluded from doing certain things on that site. And I just want to understand exactly what you mean by that, because it's relevant here in the sense that I get the feeling this is like a first mover advantage situation where perhaps if your planning application had materialized at some stage, that would have directly impacted on what this planning application that we're seeing here today. But unfortunately, it's the other way around. They've put their planning application in first, and now you're at a disadvantage. So am I correct in assuming that this site will stay as a strategic industrial location? You'll have commercial units, but you're also looking to put housing above the site. Is that what is going to be really, really relevant here?
Yeah, there's a couple of elements to that. I think firstly, yes, I suppose what you might say we are on the back foot slightly, but I think because it's not comprehensive development and it doesn't kind of, what they've done to look at their site in terms of what's surrounding it is precluding the optimization of sites coming forward for both re-provision of commercial development as well as the provision of much needed housing. The way that they've designed their scheme, they've built right up until the building line to give 1.5 meters between the two buildings. So if that was built, you're never going to get anything built next to it because of effects on amenity, daylight, sunlight, and distances purely between buildings. So that's kind of the first element of it. And what was the second part of the question? Apologies. Can you not remember yourself?
I'm I think you've answered the question in the sense that
okay.
I think you're looking at putting housing on that site.
Well, oh yes, that was that was the other point. I think firstly, it's protecting the sill allocation of it, and secondly, of course, it would be remiss not to look at putting housing on there. It would only be acceptable though to the council if it was coupled with the reprovision of the same amount of employment floor space like Manderson House is doing. So that's a legitimate way of intensifying the use of a site by providing residential and re-providing employment floor space.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, Councillor Atwell?
Yeah, just a question. I'm really confused. So if in the future Mr. MP Motors decides to put, say, a 4-story block of flats up, because those balconies are overlooking, then obviously there's going to be a big problem, isn't there?
Yes, yeah, and
Okay,
it's not just balconies; it's habitable rooms, and it's purely down to the distance between the sites because there's no gap to allow for anything to come forward on the MP Motors site. And you know, our main case is that this site should have been designed in a comprehensive manner with other sites that are around it, so that it can be optimised in line with strategic policy.
Okay, I can't see any more hands. Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
Thank you, councillors.
Right, can I now invite the applicant, Kevin Scott, please? And you'll have 5 minutes again, and we'll remind you when 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Kevin Scott from Solve Planning, acting on behalf of the applicant. Right, I'm going to try and avoid this becoming one planning consultant said this and one planning consultant said another, and I'm probably going to fail. But just coming back on some of the points raised by Mr. Osborne, I found that quite illuminating. And he very sensibly left himself a get out about whether we've been trying to contact the owners of this site, which was very sensible. From the outset, some 18 months ago, my client sought to engage with the owners of Bridge House. These offers were not taken up. Eventually, the owners suggested they might agree to a meeting, but only on the basis of rather unreasonable preconditions. I did have an email from one of Mr. Osborne's colleagues as well, but it wasn't particularly trying to engage. It was more a request for me to justify the application to them, but I'd rather do that in front of you this evening. But importantly, and as you've heard, the scheme has been subject to public consultation and publicly available. We also reached out as part of that public consultation to them. And at no point has Mr. Osborne or his colleagues sent us details of their proposals explaining why they feel our application would prejudice redevelopment of Bridge House. But despite this lack of engagement, it's not a matter that we've ignored in designing the scheme. And part of our design process, the architects made sure this site could come forward at a similar density to that we're proposing for Manderson House. And that's one of the things I found particularly interesting. If you were going to build on the adjacent site, Bridge House, at the equivalent density, not only to our site, but the other sites along Commerce Road, you'd come up roughly about 35 units. I think I heard the figure of 58 mentioned. And that perhaps gives me some idea as to why they're struggling to make that fit on the site and meet all the amenity space and privacy distance requirements. But we have provided a model that shows how that can come forward at that level of density and providing for the commercial use along the lines that was being discussed. And it does meet all of those standards. There are different ways you can configure it. You could probably do better than that, but it's obviously not our job to design the scheme, but just to give officers and members the reassurance that we're not prejudicing that scheme coming forward. And that's exactly the approach that's required by London Plan Policy D3, which was cited by Mr. Osborne. And perhaps most importantly for yourselves tonight is the fact that this issue is being considered by your officers who have the benefit of having looked at the proposals that are coming forward, which I don't, and they're able to come to a balanced assessment, and they've made that clear in the officers' report. So I'd like to think you can be confident that our proposals won't prejudice either the redevelopment of the site or its continuing uses in commercial use. I think talk of intensification of the commercial use is a bit of a red herring when we know that they've come forward with proposals for a housing scheme and commercial uses. But so perhaps I'm happy to answer questions on that afterwards. But perhaps moving on from that, one of the most crucial factors in shaping the proposals this evening is the extremely constructive discussions with officers that we've had throughout the process, starting with our initial pre-application discussions at the end of 2021. And it's influenced the scheme in significant ways, including form and layout, final design, configuration of the commercial space, and creating an affordable housing mix, as you heard, which helps address the priority need for 4-bedroom accommodation in Brentford. And we believe this has led to a scheme with significant benefits for the area, including its flexible modern commercial floor space, in a very sustainable building, creating a great place to live and work. That's really important to us, that mix and making that work. And also in a tenure-blind, affordable housing geared to meet that priority need. It's a design which tries to pick up on the industrial heritage of the area. It includes public realm improvements on Commerce Road, at that entrance to Commerce Road, and importantly, as we've heard, including and protecting that link to the linear park and providing the active frontage to Commerce Road. Very happy to answer questions, but obviously I do hope you'll be able to support the officer recommendation, and perhaps in questions I can pick up on some of the other queries that were raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One is on the existing condition, because that, I suppose, is the bit that is really relevant in terms of planning and the laws we have to, the regulations we have to follow. It is very close to the back of the MOT garage. You have got balconies, you have got windows. It does look like there's a light issue with some of them. You know, I'd like to understand how that you expect that to work going forward, on the assumption the MOT garage is staying for some time, and what the quality of those flats in those places are in terms of daylight and sunlight. So that's the first one.
Yeah, I think it kind of starts from that assessment of noise in the first place as one of the key things that informs the design. And it was useful having those early conditions. You mentioned earlier about the Holiday Inn and the plant on that. That it was good to have that information before we started doing the testing and looking out for that to make. And as you heard in the officer presentation, this is all based and designed on the fact that this is a very noisy area, and that's so important. The agent of change principle is at the heart of this development, that you don't prejudice that you design the scheme for that. And so that's in terms of layout and acoustics, both in terms of the units themselves and also on that podium slab where you've got the communal landscaping and amenity space, and again at roof level, that all meets reasonable levels in terms of noise and amenity.
But you do have balconies on fronting that side as well, don't you?
Yeah, there is that trade-off. There are some balconies there, but it's that still provides a valuable amenity space. The ability to step outside, take a moment, and it's unlikely that use will be going 24/7. It's not one of those uses. But the apartments themselves won't be suffering problems in terms of noise from that unit. Also, each of those apartments have access to the communal landscaping as well, so that it's not an acute pressure on that balcony facing that space.
Thank you. And the second one is, well, it sounds like we've got a deal, right? If you guys can buy the land, take this plan away, come back with a combined site, master plan it properly, probably get a couple of layers off it, probably get a few more flats in it, probably get a bit more industrial space. Jobs are done, and why not?
Well, because we tried and we couldn't, and we haven't had any meaningful dialogue, but it's not through want of trying. That was very much the approach that we sought at the beginning. But you can't wait
in the
forever.
room now. You could probably sort it out outside.
Well, that'll be a lovely thought. Planning committees bringing people together. It's
we've always wanted to design schemes at committee.
Yeah, look, it was something that we tried to do. We went to some pains to do that, but having not got to that point, we're determined to bring this scheme forward. We wanted to make something happen here. bring something forward that contributes both to housing, but also to sort of a meaningful contribution to the SIL employment here. Because at the moment it's basically garaging for cars and some associated offices, none of which are really SIL uses. So here's a chance to make something happen. But what we've tried to do throughout that is to make absolutely sure that as and when, at any stage in the future, the adjoining owners here or on the north side can still come forward with something that follows the similar principles. No one is prejudiced, no one's disadvantaged. And I think using that density as a guide, as a check, it's a kind of equality, because we're all working to the same level of housing. No one's trying to get a bigger slice of the pie, or it's as good a benchmark as I can think of for, is this equitable in terms of the approach?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Strouter, please.
Yeah, just to follow up the question, I asked of the officers, at this stage, do you have any sense or feel what the uptake is going to be for the commercial properties and what's going to be in it? Because we are aware there's a couple of places where development's gone ahead and it all looks grand on the plan, but then we end up with empty units underneath residential property because then they're not in the right place or nobody wants them. So does your client have a sort of crystal ball on this one?
Probably can't go that far, but we very much so in terms of trying to understand what might work in that area. And I know you probably have any number of developers who rock up here with clever names for developments. We've gone for, but we'll have a go. Ours is Maker's Yard, and that's important to us, that you can bring in quite a diverse mix of units. So we're trying to keep as flexible a space as possible for smaller business. That might be anything from something more high tech on the research and development side, but it might also be something much more on the craft side in terms of looking at pottery, things like that, bike repair, all of those sorts of things. And the idea is you create some kind of hub that generates momentum and attracts uses to work alongside each other within a flexible space that can work as a startup and also help you grow in that unit as the business sort of changes over time. And so you create that. It is a hub because you have that sort of symbiosis that everything works together. And we did quite a lot of the client looked at quite a lot of the sort of market research to make sure that was something that would have legs and get some traction. And by having the variety and not closing yourself off to different types and different sizes of company, we think we can make that work and do it within, as you heard, the very sort of, you can't talk about the use classes order and make it exciting, but very much tied to those SIL related uses, the light industry and the research and development.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lal.
Yes, Chair. So basically before us, in my opinion, it looks like we've got a fairly good application from yourself. But one thing that's still bugging me is that after what Councillor Rees-Williams has said as well, a holistic site, and you can see it's a holistic site and it should really have been developed together. Now, there are questions to be asked later on to officers, but you've also heard from the objector in the sense not fully being aware of the development process and what needed to happen to put applications forward. On the other hand, you come across as being very, very professional and knowledgeable about the manner in which the projects are brought forward. Given the chance, would it be possible, if circumstances allow you, to further engage with the objector?
I think. Oh, I'm quite happy to answer it. And there are obviously legal issues here, and the idea of approving the application that's in front of you. But I'm conscious of the debate that's going on. I know how important this is to members, so I'm happy to answer if that's okay, Chair, through you.
Sorry,
I'll take your advice.
Yeah, please answer, but in the round. But members are asking a lot of questions, not about planning application that's in front of them. Yeah, and which has been suggested, trying to conjure up, and that's probably a bad phrase, another application, which could happen behind the scenes or whatever. But the reality is what you've got is that the application that's in front of you being submitted by the owners of that land, and that's not what needs to be considered tonight. But by all means, as you said, the objector, or sorry, the applicant.
Definitely the applicant.
Sorry,
Let's
yes,
not get that clear. Hope that's coming over. Yeah, no.
Lal, you had another question?
He can come back. He can come back and answer that. But clearly, the objectors already, and I already said that questions will be asked of officers. Yeah, because the objectors already said that certain discussions have happened with officers regarding that site, and it hasn't moved forward. So we'll find out about that. But let's say it still prejudices that their right to develop that site as well. But having said that, would you be minded?
What I would say to that is all the reasons I've given, I think the application stands on its own without prejudicing development can come forward. There is nothing to stop both parties continuing to talk. If what they're saying is something they want to follow through and have discussions, that can all take place. And if at some point in the future that was possible, then another application could come in front of you. If that was a workable solution, this wouldn't, approving the scheme tonight would not close the door on that. And if discussions can take place, that's great. But we have tried for months and months and months to get to that point. I've never been heckled by a planning consultant or advisor, but that's a new one for me. Genuinely, we've been trying this for months, and we've got to this point with an application that has fully taken into account the adjoining site. And I don't think we can do more than that, but we're not closing the door to, if someone wants to talk to us and it makes commercial sense, then that can only be good news. But I don't think it would be a reason for not taking the application forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Bhatti.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the objector and your good self too, there seems to be a dialogue missing between two parties here. And like Councillor Williams said, there is a chance for you to have a chat.
So, members, we need to consider the application that's in front of you tonight to move forward, to make a decision. You are the planning authority this evening at making a decision about this application. Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion in relation to what could happen. Yeah, and I think the gentleman has answered that. But we need to discuss. Members need to be discussing the application, its height, its etc. Rather than what could happen in the future. I'm afraid.
Yes, thank you. But we're here to listen to the objectors and the applicants, and then make a sensible decision at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Councillor Lal.
Yeah, could the legal advisor also take the opportunity to advise me that surely the rights of the landowner adjacent to the development have to be taken into account?
Those are not the questions that have been asked as far as I'm concerned, but the rights of the owner adjacent has been considered in the report, and we've heard from the officers about that. Obviously, there is a disagreement in relation to that, but all those rights have been taken into account. It's not like they've been ignored. You've heard from the objector quite clearly at length. Now you're hearing from. So I think you've got the applicant's representative in front of you to ask about planning matters in relation to this application.
Thank you for that. Okay, any more questions? No, thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. You want to hang on? Matthew's going to come back fast. You want to ask a question from Matthew?
I was going to make a suggestion.
Let Matthew answer that, please. Yeah. Okay, Matthew.
Thanks, Chair. I'll cover the legal issues first. I've just triple checked the records. They were consulted as part of our consultation process. A site notice was erected outside of the site, so we've fulfilled our obligations in terms of consulting on the application. There has a plan that has been discussed. This is not material to your consideration tonight. Essentially, what happened was that as part of our discussions with the developer, we asked them what steps have been made to engage with Bridge House, as you've been asking, what they could have done to assist in this situation, and they provided a plan suggesting that Bridge House could still come forward with residential on the site with a setback from Manderson House, and they suggested, as you've heard from representatives tonight, that they suggest that that is a similar density of development. That's not material to your consideration tonight. That is not a decision drawing. So we're asking you to disregard that. That's not a legal issue. It's just a suggested drawing which we haven't checked. We haven't been able to verify. So I'll come on to the couple of issues that have been discussed already. But yes, it would be great if the two sites could come forward together. You've already got a bit of insight as to why that's unlikely to happen, why that's not happened today. And also, yes, if Bridge House were to come forward with a scheme subsequently that was 8 stories high within 1.5 metres of the boundary, we would have issues in terms of loss of light to units were they approved tonight. The pertinent thing is, what weight can you afford to the scheme suggested tonight on Bridge House? And the answer to that is that very little weight can be afforded to it because it's not allocated site. It is not a fully formed scheme in front of you. Yes, it's been to pre-app. Yes, we have suggested that there is potential for the site to come forward as a mixed-use scheme. But in terms of your decision making tonight, there is limited weight you can afford to that. So I understand the issues of fairness. Say first come, first served. It does sound unfair, but in terms of the planning issues in front of you tonight, that's got very limited material consideration. What has been said that is pertinent and has been presented to us is the two policies that were mentioned. So first of all, in terms of the industrial use proposed on the site, potentially proposed in the site, sorry, so agents attained is designed for existing uses. The reason I keep saying the caveat but is that I just want to reiterate that this is a strategic industrial location. They're safeguarded for industry, and they are in London Plan. It suggests that we should provide for industrial locations, the intensification of them, because this is where industrial is supposed to go. Notwithstanding that, so I'm suggesting that's a material consideration. I'm suggesting it does not form grounds for refusal because A, we don't have any evidence that will come forward, and B, in terms of the overall performance of the strategic industrial site location, it is not well performing. There's the vacancies in this site to the north, there's vacancies. There are also residential units now within the site to the north approved as part of prior approvals. Overall, if you're looking at the strategic industrial site, we're suggesting that it's improved as a result of this scheme. So I'm asking you to look at it holistically in those terms. And then again, similar to the residential, there's no residential scheme in front of you tonight, but there is a policy, which is policy D3 in the London Plan, which looks to optimise sites. It suggests that you need to look at optimising delivery of sites. Slight irony being that both of them have cited policy D3 as justification for their own schemes. So the developer are talking about having optimised their own site by broadening that by proposing a scheme that goes up to the boundary of the site, and then the objectives suggest that that's affecting the optimization of their site. I don't have the clarity in terms of the London Plan. I believe the London Plan policy D3 does refer to that, but notwithstanding that, there's a whole supporting supplementary guidance for the London Plan, and that for that specific policy, and it doesn't really make reference to how you should design a scheme to avoid impacting on adjoining sites. It's all about designing your own site. So I'm suggesting that that's not a reason for refusal. And yeah, I think I would probably have to leave it at that. But just to reiterate, you've got a fully formed proposal for 111 homes, commercial floor space in front of you tonight that's fully formed, and then an application has been suggested that's not fully formed at all. It's just at a pre-application stage. So we're suggesting that obviously the scheme in front of you tonight takes prominence, and the policies that have been talked about, they don't form grounds for refusing the scheme.
Thank you, Matthew. Any more questions for Matthew? Go on.
Yeah, just on that missing daylight assessment that has not been shared, not been published. If we have documents submitted as part of applications, surely they should go on the as a public record. And have they gone on yet? And if not, why not?
So that they're not material, they're not a decision drawing for the application, they're not material to decision making tonight. And I'm suggesting that it's possibly not accurate. It could be deemed to be misleading because there's not been, it's a supporting document, and I understand why it's been submitted, but it speculates, it makes a number of assumptions. So it's not, doesn't form part of decision making. There's a separate issue about, I have that information, should I provide it as part of a freedom of information request? That's fine. But as I say, in terms of what's happening tonight, it's not a decision drawing. So, it shouldn't really be referenced in decision making.
Sorry, Chair, but somewhere on the report I read that the daylight assessment that's already been submitted is not suitable. It's not trustworthy. Is that, am I wrong? Where did I read that then?
So the plan that we've been discussing, the legal issue that we've been discussing, it's not purely a daylight assessment. What it is it shows what could come forward on Bridge House to still preserve the light in this scheme, should it get approval and should it be built out. And it shows, so I'm talking about, so it shows that there could be done with a setback. So the applicants are suggesting that a scheme on Bridge House could come forward without impacting on light on that property, without with a similar density as the scheme proposed tonight. It's not a full daylight assessment. There is a separate daylight assessment attached to the actual planning application, which is a public document, which is material to consideration, and that's to do with the existing arrangement, so impact on light as a result of the existing arrangement on site currently.
One more, Chair. On Mr. Osborne's presentation, he said the potential of this development, and I know it's not exactly it's something that we need to check, is it would go down from a potential 58 to 14 units as on that. The other one is also the other issue is informing neighbours. I know we put signs on lampposts, but do we go back and check a week or two later if they're still there? And there's also and then also, how do we send, which letters do we send, and where do we send them? Because some people don't get them. If we sent them to the registered office, for example, they might not get through to the functional office. How can we be sure that they did actually get a notification directly?
So we send it to the postal address. So in this case, I believe it's 2 Commerce Road. We would generally get bounce backs if it doesn't reach the site address. So the Royal Mail would send them back to us, and I don't believe that happens. So we do erect the site notices. We don't go back to check them. In terms of our legal obligation is to erect it. We're actually not obliged to go, as bad as it sounds, we're not obliged to go back and recheck that it stayed up there. There's obviously a time constraint to have officers routinely going back to a site to check it's up there, but it was erected. We have fulfilled that obligation.
Okay, right. I can't see any more hands. Right, thank you. I'm going to open for debate now. You want to discuss that in there? Okay, it's open for debate. Councillor Todd. You want to?
Thank you, Chair. I think the whole ambiguity surrounding the consultation between the objectors and the applicant is something that would probably need to be addressed again. Like I would suggest better consultation, because according to them, they weren't consulted at all. I'll probably defer. I would probably refer. Sorry.
I think it's been answered by the legal requirement. It's been carried out by the officers, and that's what's important for members tonight. I really don't think we should get confused as regards the relationship between neighbours, as regards whether they spoke to each other or didn't speak to each other. That's not part of the planning consultation process for you to consider. What was the site notice, letters went out to the postal address are the important things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are open for debate now, not questions. So debate, please. Yeah. Councillor William, do you want to say something here?
Other than to say, maybe it's a declaration of interest. I live in Brentford Lock West, which is over the way, so not very far away from this site. I did receive, I was invited to a consultation. I did attend one at the Holiday Inn, which is right opposite and the MP Brentford site. So I think we've got some red herrings going around at the moment, but that's a different thing. Obviously, the land ownership thing is outside of the remit of what we can decide on, so I don't think we should talk about it. I mean, it's a classic case of, in an ideal world, we'd all be able to plan better buildings and build better buildings if we could just decide which bits of land should go together and design them together. That isn't the powers that we have available to us. Maybe they go, we'll go sort it out and bring something else forward. That would be great, but I won't hold my breath. I don't have a problem with what I've seen from this scheme on the materiality of what we can consider. It's good for homes. It'll be good for getting some industrial use back onto that site. Having toured the site, it is vacant, and even when it was occupied, it was mostly car parking for people doing pickups from Heathrow, this site can be improved, and I think this will improve it.
Anybody's proposing anything? It's been proposed for approval. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Reece says. I think the other thing I'd like to add is number of residents. So it's in my ward, number of residents came and spoke to me about it. They had concerns, and I've looked at it in detail, and I couldn't find any material planning grounds for refusal. Nothing I've heard tonight suggests there's any grounds for refusal. And I think what we want to avoid is refusing it and then that getting overturned and having a lot of cost implications to the council. The only two things I'd add is in the cycle parking, and please correct if I'm wrong, I couldn't see any allocation within the residential cycle parking for non-standard bikes. So I'd want a condition allowing 5% non-standard cycle. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, so in the current plans, they haven't shown provision for non-standard cycles. However, we are able to secure that within the condition, so that's being accounted for.
You're already doing that?
Yeah, we're able to secure that by the condition, as they've demonstrated that there is sufficient space within the stores to accommodate that.
There will be condition, that's what she said.
And will that be 5%?
Issue.
Yes, 5%, which I believe equates to 10 spaces out of 199.
Mm-hmm. And then also I'd like to propose, you've got the green in Field Lane Estate, which is public accessible space, mostly used by residents of Field Lane, but they're going to be impacted a bit by visual amenity and overlooking. So I'd like to suggest a modest S106 agreement for £3,000 for environmental enhancements to the green.
I'm not certain that would pass the test as regards. I mean, it's not. What's been offered is in front of members, and it's a legal test in relation to what should be provided, and it needs to relate and mitigate the granting of this planning permission.
Are you saying the condition can't be added?
Sorry, Councillor, you were asking for a section 106 contribution of £3,000. That's not a condition; it can only be done by agreement because it's a monetary contribution.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Luki.
Sorry, in my experience.
Can you switch your microphone on, please, Councillor Mori?
In my experience, members of planning committee can ask for section 106 to mitigate losses of amenity and to enhance neighbouring facilities, and we've done that down at Reynolds Way on 2 developments there to improve access to Thornbury Park, for example. So obviously I'm no planning lawyer, but I know that we've got precedent here where if it's £3,000, I think he's being quite generous. Actually, is Councillor Bowring. Should this be approved? I think more, because Field Lane, having represented that road before as a councillor, I do know that there's a need for amenity down there. So you're underselling yourself, Councillor Bowring.
Because it's been done other sites doesn't necessarily make it right. And as I said, there's a legal test. Can I suggest maybe that that part of it is delegated to officers to negotiate with the developer in relation to, and to verify that it will actually pass the legal test as regards mitigating the granting of this planning permission. I do think it's important. There's tests for conditions, and I pipe up every now and again and say, well, it doesn't apply that test, and our Matthew said he's happy with it, and I think that. And there's an even more important test in relation to contributions of money, and I think we need to guarantee that actually applies, and that it's been offered by the developer as well.
I mean, yeah, by hook or by crook, yeah. So,
I suggest
what's the
that
process
that part
for
to
that?
be delegated to negotiate and maybe refer back to the chair in relation to its conclusion. It's my suggestion.
Okay, and can we include ward councillors in that?
Yeah, can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Yes.
Then, yeah, I propose we approve. Oh, sorry, no.
There's, are there any other? I won't go into over.
Yes, Chair. So I've already stated earlier on when I heard the applicant speak that in general terms, I found there was merit in the application, and the references to the Brentford Voice and the West London Chambers and the healthcare provision, the Section 106 funding for that. So all very, very positive in that. Councillor Bowing's request for additional funding, etc., which has been discussed and maybe decided that it should be delegated to officers. Yeah, that's one way to do it. There's another way, and that would be to defer this application, get that agreement done, and bring it back to the committee. But I ask that if this application is not time limited or time loaded or there's any restriction on it, then I suggest we can defer it.
Sorry, I want to respond to that. I totally disagree. We're becoming a bartering house, not a planning committee. I've recommended approval. Will someone endorse it or not endorse it?
I'll second you, John.
Thank you.
Anyway. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor. So Councillor Bowing suggested three matters here. So delegate officers, £3,000 for field day, that's fine. We think we've covered the cycle parking, but right at the start of the presentation, you mentioned the boundary treatment as well and an additional condition there. So yeah, connection to the park and restricting it from the front.
Yes, can we include that? So a boundary treatment that prevents any private access from the first floor podium to the proposed High Line in perpetuity.
So with those conditions, it's been proposed and seconded. Yes? Okay, can we take a vote on that, please? In favor of proposed, yeah? Okay, against?
Sorry, can we go back on this?
Oh, sorry, can we go back on the proposal, please? Approval, proposal for approval. Can we, hands up again, please, Councillor Todd? Yeah. Okay, against? Abstentions? Yeah. So, what's this?
Sorry, can we go back to refusal?
Go back to refusal again, please.
I need to make sure I've got the right one.
So where do we stand?
Seven against.
Okay.
7 each.
Seven against.
Seven
and
against.
then we have one abstention and then 5 approvals. So
I think, no, it was more.
It's been-
Apologize. Can we have,
Yeah. Can we have the hands like that, please? I'm sorry.
nice and clear, everybody.
Nice and clear hands again. Councillor Todd, sorry, for the approval. Can we have the vote again, please? For approval. That's your case, yeah.
I've got 6.
Six.
7 now.
Oh, 7 now, okay.
Okay, so
And
approved.
against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 again.
Oh, no, look at that
5.
now. Sorry. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6.
7 against. So it's tied and you abstained. So it's to you, Chair.
You have to.
Ah.
We need to make a decision.
So how we make a decision then?
Cheers.
What has been suggested? What has been suggested for a refusal, I have to give a planning reason for that. Have we got a planning reason for refusal? Open again for debate, please.
Chair,
Yeah.
look, how it works. Sorry, I know you're a chair as much as I've been a chair. You've got a casting vote. That's what old councillor
Yeah.
whatever
No,
her name did with the
no, that's what I was
with the
discussing,
B&Q.
Tony.
But you've got a casting vote,
Yeah.
and we also have another proposal on the table as well, which is a live one, which is councillor allows for deferral. So that maybe take that vote, and that will kind of give you the Solomon position.
Sorry, we are still talking about approval at the moment. Okay, Councillor Stroud, you can say anything?
Yeah, thank you. Split vote, absolutely. Without putting anyone on the spot, a number of people who voted against, I'd quite like to hear from them what their planning reasons were for voting against this particular one. Because we've heard most of the people who voted for have given sound reasons for it. I haven't yet heard from any of the members of the committee who voted against.
We have an opportunity to vote on a different, which is deferral, and that does not prevent this application falling.
Yeah, I've been advised. We'll come back on that. At the moment, we are still discussing. A debate is still open there. Yeah, Councillor.
By that very same token, I would like all the persons who have not spoken, who voted in favour of this application, to explain why they're in favour, to make it fair. But this is very unusual, and it's it doesn't happen very often. But I think the rationale for the deferment, we can either delegate to officers. It's up to us as committee members whether we delegate them to do it and then come back in conjunction with the ward members, or we ask them, no, this time round, we want you to go away, look at the funding requirements that we're asking for. We're only asking deferment. It can still come back to us. If it's not time loaded, it's not like time limited, bring it back to us and we'll approve it.
Just on the technical point, we don't have defer was proposed, was never seconded. We've moved on. We've had a vote, yeah. And the situation is it was tied. The chair.
On the reason I can vote.
Yeah, and so the chair. My interpretation is the chair has asked for additional information as regards him using his casting vote, and I think that's appropriate in the circumstances. So we're still in the situation. We've got a tied vote. No decision has been made by the council, and I think it was legitimate to ask in relation to reasons for refusal, because the reasons for approval are 99% set out in the report. It's the reason for refusal that should be debated.
Chair, we're still having a debate here. So to defer the application, the proposal is still there. So why are we not considering that?
Still into the first stage, which is not finished yet.
Sorry, Chair, do I understand that we've opened that for debate again, or if we are?
I'm asking for a reason for refusal. The chair is asking, because he's going to make his casting vote. The chair is asking if any members have any planning reasons why he should vote for refusal. He's heard reasons for approval. He's asking if any members have any planning reasons for refusal to aid him in his decision of his casting vote.
Thank you, Mr. Boring.
And it's important because the officers have to give solid planning reasons for why we have voted to refuse if we do so, because otherwise it can be appealed to the planning inspectorate and we'll probably lose.
Sorry.
Correction, Chair, we're not saying to refuse it, we're saying to defer it.
No, we have not come to deferral because that wasn't seconded. The proposal was still there to go ahead. For our proposal is to approve it, and then the vote is 7-7. I am asking people who wants to refuse, give me a reason, the planning reason, so I can vote. I'm looking for a planning reason to refuse.
So my reason for refusal is the flats that are overlooking MP Motors. There's the balconies that are looking over.
So they're overlooking a garage. So yes, overlooking is a planning material consideration, but that's generally in terms of loss of privacy to neighbouring site. It's a garage, so there's no one living there. So if you suggest there was overlooking, that's the problem that we have there. It's overlooking of an MOT garage is not, in our opinion, a sound reason for refusing an application.
If we are looking for if this is what we've come to and we're looking for the refusals, reasons for refusals, is against policy for height. It's against the loss of employment space, and it's if we want to look at if we want to refer to local London Plan policy D13 and D3. So. And officers can explain what that is. So if that's something to if that's something that you know there's I think there are valid and withholding of information that has not been put before us here at the planning committee nor available on site publicly. By refusing this. By not approving, sorry, rather than refusing, by not approving, there is a difference of what's here, okay, and we vote not to approve, but there is another ambition here. Hang on, there will be another ambition should that approval fall. There'll be another ambition where there'll be where it'll be moved, and no doubt this time seconded. For deferral, and it can come back to us, whether it's for the section 106 about clarification on heights and on all the other stuff that we've mentioned and we've not really had the answers to so far. So that's why, and then perhaps you could use your casting vote then with that caveat, that extra information.
Thank you. And Councillor Stoutup, you.
Oh, well, yeah. Councillor Lucas made some good points there, you know, but they're superficial because they've all been dealt with. I mean, this does not, and in fact, it's one of them is perverse because this actually creates employment opportunities rather than removes them, because it takes what is actually an underused and disused site and creates additional new employment opportunities. We've already dismissed the overlook. I believe the planning officers very adequately, certainly to my satisfaction, explained the missing document, that it wasn't a material document and therefore would not, unless we choose to disbelieve the officer, and that's not something we would routinely do, that it would not materially affect our decision. And the height one's been dealt with as well. So to trot those out again, I say on the surface sound like good planning objections, but they've all been dealt with and they've all been put to bed, and put to bed adequately in the document as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is not a debate between you and me. No, all right, okay. Otherwise, we'd just be in a room by ourselves. John,
go on.
and see who'd win. You'd probably win. You've had the army training. So the thing is, I said you'd probably win if it was just you and me together in the room. Okay, you've had the training. So what I'm saying here is we know this about underused properties not being used for employment, but they're allowed to be used for employment. An employment site could be used if the rent was low enough. So that's not really an argument to use for redeveloping this site. Apart from housing, which we have got potentially a clearer opportunity for more housing on this site.
No, I'm just taking the advice for that. Okay. What happens if I don't use my second vote? Seconder and first one, you have to sort of come back to that, and I can then go for a deferral. So what's happening there? Yeah, go on.
Chair, you're chair of the planning committee. You've heard the evidence. You weren't, your ears weren't muffled during it. The referral's utterly spurious. It's utterly spurious. The decision is quite clear. As my colleague over there said, Councillor Lucas tried very hard, made some good points, but they don't cut away at that objection. The objection to me is wholly inappropriate. It's capable of being passed and should be passed. And it's up to you as chair to show leadership if you believe in that.
You want to say something?
Only to add that what we've heard here tonight, and consistent with what happens with planning as well, is nothing decided tonight prevents anything else happening elsewhere on who owns what piece of land, and it doesn't prevent another application coming forward should such people be able to do such a deal. So you can pass this, and it doesn't preclude anything else from happening. So, I mean, an inspector is going to find this hilarious watching this video, honestly. I mean, we were just in big trouble if we end up having no good reasons for rejecting. And yeah, I have to say I'm with John and with John.
Right, so I'm not going to use my second vote. Councillor Lal, can you propose the deferral then, or whatever you want to propose?
Chair, I propose that we defer this report and that the requests that were previously made by Councillor Bowring are included into the report. Furthermore, I think we could do with more clarification on the height aspect within the report, and also references to D13 and D13 as was previously stated.
Somebody's going to second that? Okay, now we'll take a vote on the deferral, okay? Votes for the deferral. Have the hands up for refusal again, please, for deferral. Deferral, yeah.
Against deferral.
Against the deferral. Yeah, hang on. Against the deferral, yeah?
So against the vote.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, Councillor Todd as well.
5, okay. No abstentions, please. Only one, Councillor Joseph.
It's been deferred.
So it's been deferred, yep. All right, members, do you need 5 minutes break?
Yes, please.
Okay. We'll have a 5 minutes break, then we start again, yeah? Come on, Councillor Bhatti. Mhm. All right, welcome back. And the next application is item 5, outside 548 Chiswick High Road. And Matthew again?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just going to get the correct slide up. So basically, this is outside 548 Chiswick High Road. I'll just show where that is. Oh, sorry, my screen's not updating with what's on. Excuse me, I'm just going to stop sharing and then reshare the screen so I'm showing you the right slides. Thank you. Sorry, it's showing correctly now. So 548 Chiswick High Road, this is the site plan. The red outline shows the location of the communication hub. So you can see Chiswick Business Park, just the top left-hand side of that. So it's that end of Chiswick High Road near Gunsbury Station. What is proposed is this communications hub. It is 2.6 meters tall, 1.3 meters wide, 0.3 meters deep. You can see where it's located in the street scene here. I'll move on to the plans because they show you broadly what it is. But basically, it's a phone. It's got a defibrillator in it, but it's also got this quite significant display screen, which is facing west, which is 1.9 by 1.065 meters. And this is where it'd be going. So the left-hand side shows the street scene is existing. The right-hand side shows the street scene with this hub in place. Then moving back through that. So this is now looking from the west-hand side of it, looking back towards the where the hub's going. And yeah, so that's broadly what's being proposed. So just to be clear, so this was an application, a similar application was in front of us, albeit slightly smaller. I think it's back in 2018 or something. We refused it. The applicant, JCDecaux, appealed it. They were successful on the appeal. The inspector found that it did not harm the impact on the street scene. The inspector found that there was not undue danger caused to vehicles emerging from the building to the east of the site here, which you'll hear representations on. Ergo, they didn't implement it. They need to submit another application because the time expired. The situation we're in now is that acknowledging the planning inspector's decisions being material to this decision-making process, we are therefore now recommending approval. So if it's okay, I'll leave it to representations unless people have got questions, of course.
Right, members, questions for Matthew? Yeah, Mr. Boring first.
Thank you, Chair. Bowering. Matthew, so if I understood correctly, we previously refused it. They appealed it, and they won the appeal.
That's correct, yes.
On what grounds was it refused? I know you said it, but you gave the reasons, you gave the things, the planning, what it was found not to do, but what were the grounds it was refused on?
So the key grounds that we discussed at the appeal were, the reason for refusal were impact on the street scene, so street clutter, too flashy, so detracting from the character of the area, and then its impact on vehicular safety. So this particular issue is that you've got vehicles that are emerging from the property to the north, and it impacts on their sight lines. So it's visibility to vehicles and distractions to vehicles.
And so, the street clutter.
Yeah.
Can I ask if a question would be appropriate to ask? And then if it is, I'll ask it. Would it be appropriate to ask what it cost us to defend that decision?
It was just officer time, so we didn't have costs awarded against us. It was officer time, which is the time it takes to write a statement, which is perhaps a day's work plus the administrative functions behind it.
What, that's 10 grand a day for you, I assume?
I didn't do it.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Todd.
Sorry, massive screen, just to carry a little box. Our local church, a number of them have got these units, defibrillators, wonderful, goes on the wall. You don't need a double bed size advertising screen to justify that. The church doesn't put racks of Bibles in the high road.
We're suggesting that need isn't necessarily the consideration here. It's whether it adversely impacts on highway safety and whether it adversely impacts on the character of the area. The need for it isn't well, it is material, but it's not a reason for refusing the application.
Okay, but it's an obstruction of the footway, isn't it? Highways Act 1835 makes it quite clear. Obstructing the footway. The lawyer's pricked his ears, he knows the act. Will you advise, yeah, you were there, yeah.
So we are suggesting, you can see on the screen in front of me now that there is sufficient width there for the pedestrians to pass without being impeded with that, with the hub still in place.
Well, I don't accept that, but I hear what you say, and with respect, it's very, very dangerous, and it becomes impossible for people leaving adjacent roads. The eye line is completely closed.
So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult situation because obviously we refused it the first time around making these arguments. We have been told by the planning inspectorate that you can, I think, expect a degree of obstruction. They would expect drivers to be able to pull forward to therefore regain the sight lines. There's already obstructions there. So the inspector was suggesting that even in that situation, you can still have sufficient sight lines not to cause harm.
Okay, but you're not addressing the obstructions. Okay. Thanks so much.
All right. Councillor Williams, did you put your hand up? No? Okay, Councillor Loki.
Can you tell us how different this application is from the previous one? There wasn't a defibrillator on the previous application, or was there?
So yeah, there wasn't a defibrillation in the previous application. This application is 10 centimeters taller, 30 centimeters wider, and 6 centimeters thicker, and slightly different location as well as a result of our own negotiations. Sorry, I'm looking at you guys here.
So the application that was appealed and allowed, that was 900 mil from the curb. This one will be 650 mil from the curb, and that's the minimum in line with TfL streetscape guidance.
And just on this, are there more? There's somebody in the audience there that's not going to like this. Are there more cycles coming down Chiswick High Road? Bicycles coming down Chiswick High Road since the last application was made and refused. And I've got one more after that, Chair.
Well, this isn't part of C9, but yeah, your question still stands. I don't have the figures to hand, unfortunately.
Okay.
And have we checked on the number of reports of fly tipping against similar contraptions in other parts of the borough, including Chiswick, but where we have these in other locations, you do get bags dumped against them. Have we checked that one out, or was that part of the response? Because I know officers make responses to give responses to and make these statements that cost 10 grand, according to Councillor Bowring. But do these things get checked and used as mitigation when an application comes in? I think there's or when a statement needs to be made to the planning inspectorate, for example, or if an application is being made, because we do have that problem in various other parts of the borough, noticed by residents, noticed by councillors, but not perhaps noticed by officers writing responses.
We have not checked. No, that's fair to say. I would tentatively suggest that a planning inspectorate hearing that argument would not find that way significantly into consideration of the application in terms of the policies that we've got.
Ask the next question. Can we extend the standing orders? Can somebody propose that? Seconded? Agreed? To finish this second application, yeah? Thank you. Yeah, go on, Councillor Todd.
Yeah, can I return to this, Matthew, obstruction? I'm a blind man, or I'm visually impaired. If I'm near a junction, the underlying footbricks give an indication of where they are. Someone walking down this road, how do they know there's a huge sign the size of a double bed?
Yeah,
Thanks
so
very much,
they would,
Dan. Very helpful. Yeah.
so that, as has been pointed out, there are trees and bicycle stands one side. On the other side, it's thinner, so they would have to veer away from their current course to hit that sign.
But doesn't the etiquette of your department dictate that your public safety is the primary objective?
So yeah, just to reiterate, we are suggesting there's sufficient space on the pedestrian footways to not impede that particular issue.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bhatti.
Thank you, Chair. Just a curiosity. Usually these things are much higher up. I've seen Brown Hounslow, but this is the only one I've seen at ground level, which does, pose a problem to certain people.
Oh, sorry. So we're talking about obstruction again. Yeah. Same issue though. Same answer to that. Sorry, as in like the case has been made. It's been imposed by an inspector that there's still sufficient space there for people to pass.
Councillor Hassan?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, how many bus stops are on Chiswick High Road, and how does this compare in terms of size to bus stops, existing bus stops?
Yeah, well, obviously the bus stops vary in size, but you do have bus stops, the more modern ones that have these advertising panels on, and they are roughly the same size. I couldn't tell you how many bus stops there are along Chiswick High Road.
Okay.
Lots, yeah.
Okay, any more? Yeah, you want to, Councillor Stroud first?
Yeah, just to return to the debate we had on the last one, we're just looking at the number of objections. I think if we just narrow the issues, it might be quite helpful. Because obviously, if and I assume we're going to hear from some objectors, but it would narrow the issues if we just knew which one of these are actual planning issues. Because I mean, I'm reading some of them. It makes walking down the road difficult, and it doesn't look very nice, etc. It would help us if you could just guide us to the ones which you might want to focus on. That would be helpful.
Slightly careful about how I put this, but I would suggest, so the reasons for refusal before were impact on the street scene. So its character, is it detracting from what it looks like? Does it add to visual clutter? So it's the same as any application. Is it of a design that detached from the character and appearance of the street scene? And then the other one that was fairly pertinent last time is it impeding on the safety, highway safety? And that could either be distractions to the driver due to there being an advert there and they look at the advert and they, for whatever reason, crash, or sight lines. There is a speaker tonight as a sneak preview. Sorry, he's got a slide there which is actually a representation of him driving out and looking this way. So you'll see a slide that they've got that shows how the sight lines would be impeded. So I'm suggesting highway safety, impact on the character of the area. A free flow for pedestrians, that can be an issue. I'm just saying it's not a very strong one because of the width of the pavement here is my suggestion, and existing instructions around there.
Okay, Councillor Luki, yeah.
Just I should have mentioned this earlier. We've achieved a few refusals of telecom masts in Oslin Spring Grove ward, at least. And there are guidelines on planning guidelines on those. How does this compare? Because you can refuse those masts and the associated equipment, which are lower than this what's being proposed here. You can refuse permission if they are impacting on the local amenity and the enjoyment of the area. And we are across the road from the Wellesley Road conservation area here, aren't we? And if it's in terms of defibrillators and the offer here, if it makes it a little bit more exciting for people, there's a defibrillator at the private clinic along going eastwards, and there's one at Age Concerned Chiswick at Oxford Road North. So we're not short of defibrillators. Let's put it that way. And I think there might even be one at Gunsbury Station. So that's if that was going to be the selling point, then there's perhaps no need for that. But in terms of the telecommunications policy, how does this fit in there? Would this, should anybody wish to refuse it or defer it? If anybody, would that count in this case? Or was it something that may not have been thought of at the previous application?
Sure. So telecommunication policies are quite complicated because there's different stages of it. There's some you can do without permission. There's some that you need prior approval for, which I think is possibly what we were alluding to. So prior approval is for sighting and appearance. It's very similar to what we're looking at here with the one benefit of a mast versus, sorry, I should need to pick my words better than that maybe, but a mast is providing a public service because it's helping people with their reception. Essentially, this is a phone, so you could say that benefits people because people may need to use a phone, people may use a defibrillator, but that weighs quite strongly in terms of the masts. This is actually a full planning application. It's not a prior approval, so it expands the scope of what you can look at. We're now putting it in the context of all of our policies, not just citing an appearance. But I'm going to tentatively suggest citing appearance is still probably the issue here to be looked at. That's what was focused on within the appeal decision.
Chair, 2 questions. Firstly, is this the first of its kind in our borough with the defibrillator? And secondly, sometime back we had a policy about reducing street clutter. And how does that gel with our policy?
I don't believe it's the first. I mean, what happened back in 2018, if I recall correctly, is that we had quite a few applications for this, particularly in Chiswick High Road, because that's always an intense area. There's a desire to have adverts in Chiswick High Road. It's very popular there. We refused quite a lot of them inside the conservation area. We refused this one as well, but this being outside the conservation area, it would, the inspector found it was okay. But no, it's not unique to the area. Sorry, what's the second question? Excuse me. Oh, it's not. No, it's not. I don't know the answer to that, sorry. I'm not aware of another one of the defibrillator. No, that's fair to say. I can't confirm that we haven't had an application similar to this in the borough.
Okay, and the second question was about our policies regarding street clutter and reduction of.
Yeah, again, so that's fine. So it feeds into the impact on the character of the area. So street clutter is perfectly legitimate to say that if it's an overly cluttered street, that's detracting from the character of the area. That's a decision for yourselves to make tonight if you feel like this is sufficiently cluttered as to harm the character of the area. And as Councillor Leaker points out, there's the conservation area opposite as well nearby, which is in the report, it suggests it. So that's within your gift to make that decision.
Okay, I can't see any more hands. Thank you, Matthew. Can I now invite Councillor Joanna Bidder, please? 5 minutes, Councillor, and 30 seconds will let you know.
I have a photograph of me standing in front of a board that exists already without a, can I pass it round to, because I think Councillor Asim would like to know the proportions.
Might check your messages on there as well if you're not careful. You know what's been going on down in your neck of the woods.
Sorry, can we just give it to councillors? Sorry, I do apologise. To the officers first. Yeah. Not to me. It's just we've had a few issues. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You want to check her drink as well?
Let's pass you on this web page here. If people have to.
Thank you. I'd like to raise 7 main points objecting to this application. First, public benefit. I'm sure most of you have thought what a good idea to have a defibrillator here, but this is not an application for a defibrillator. It is an application for a digital advertising hoarding. JC Deco is a global outdoor advertising business. It has added a defibrillator to sweeten the imposition of these huge and intrusive boards on the public. Please don't fall for the ruse. This is advertising street furniture specifically to meet a business purpose, connecting brands with urban audiences. And I've taken those words from JC Deco's website. Yes, towns need defibrillators, but there already are several in Chiswick, including just 768 steps away. We need a discussion in Chiswick, in all our wards really, to decide where our defibrillators should be for residents, workers, visitors, not for JC Deco, which wants them where it can advertise its clients' products. I realise JC Deco must include a percentage of time promoting the council's messages, but mostly, as I saw today, the ads are for big brands, Coca-Cola, McVitie's, Warburton's, Kenco, Costa, and others. On the communication hub, there is no evidence of demand for this. Many Chiswick cafes offer free Wi-Fi and charging. Public phones disappeared because of lack of use. Mobile contracts provide free calls. This is another distraction to give appeal to this massive advertising board and provide more advertising space, including adverts facing the phone users. Second, impact on walking, highways and transport. It is huge and dominant. The photos in the pack do not convey this, but a quick look at the JC Deco website in my photo shows how large it is in relation to a person. It will impede walking. Since the previous application was refused, the use of this pavement has changed significantly. There is now high footfall on Brentford match days, as well as on weekdays from Chiswick Business Park, 9,000 people now back at work, and from festivals in Gunnersbury Park. It is also a main east-west road. Drivers in both directions are the target. No wonder JC Deco wants it here. At nearly 9 feet tall and 4.5 feet wide, it is bigger than the previous refused application. Defibrillators, as somebody has said, are tiny. As you can see from the photo on page 4 of the officer's report, it's at the bottom. It does not need to be on a large structure that brings so many disbenefits. Third, the conservation area and aesthetics. The houses opposite are in the Wellesley Road Conservation Area, including number 367, which is a locally listed building, and the Labour Party's office. They will look out onto a lit advertising hoarding that would not be allowed on their pavement. The report says the area is a mixture of commercial and residential, but that's not correct. Apart from a vet, a beauty shop and a kitchen shop, it is blocks of flats opposite houses with the Gunnersbury Nature Reserve behind them. The commercialisation is further away. It is leafy from the high road's large, impressive, mature trees. That vista should be the view, not gaudy, bright advertising. Fourth, it is inconsistent with the previous refused application. Reasons were impairing visibility, causing harm to highway and pedestrian safety. An incongruous addition harmed the pedestrian experience and failing to preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area. That proposal was contrary to local plan policy CC1, CC4, CC5 and EC2, and so is this one. Fifth, other boroughs are refusing or removing them. Hackney refused 9 of them on a high street in July last year for being a general obstruction to the detriment of the character of the area, to the safety of highway users. It would be unnecessary street clutter and obstruct views, increasing the risk of collisions. Sixth, adding more street clutter. This application contradicts Hounslow's own vision for Chiswick, which recommends decluttering streets. Once they're in, they can't be removed. Residents objected to the huge board at Empire House, which you saw on the photo, but it was approved as JC Deco had an earlier permission for a much smaller one. The new board was then installed. It was larger, and it was put in the middle of the pavement, not in line with a tree. Enforcement did not take place. Chiswick residents have also not forgotten Lucozade, which will mean something to some of you. Seventh, it is loathed by residents. They see the reality, exploiting our neighbourhood to raise advertising revenue for JC Deco. Please don't be distracted by the defibrillator and a communication hub. This is advertising disguised as a community benefit. You are not gifting Chiswick with a defibrillator. You are blighting Chiswick with a massive advertising hoarding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Widdop. Questions for Councillor Widdop? Yeah, Councillor Williams.
I'm often confused about where the Conservative Party stands on capitalism. It turns out we're against exploitation of people now for profit-making purposes. That aside, and yeah, the objection to anything based on profit, which is very odd. Would you accept that that isn't a valid planning ground or even a valid planning consideration for rejecting something?
The profit point.
The big bad businesses advertising on big bad boards point, the general it's for profit and capitalism and people making money point isn't a relevant planning consideration. That where it comes from and what it's for isn't something we get to decide on.
I'm suggesting you don't get confused by the fact that this is a planning application for an advertising hoarding, not an offer of a defibrillator for Chiswick or a communications hub. We've got defibrillators. I've compiled a list and I've heard more from Councillor Lukey this evening. I have been trying. The interesting thing is how difficult it is to know where defibrillators are. And I suggest that what we need is, as I said, a discussion, but I think everybody needs to look at their wards to see where they are, because we just don't know. Some people are keeping them for their own premises entirely appropriately. Some people, like the one that I counted the steps from today, walking from reception to the location, is in a 24/7 hotel. So you can go and get it around the clock. The main point is register it, and then the ambulances know where they are, but that's a different point. I'm not against capitalism. I'm against over-profiteering to the detriment of people who are less well off. That's a political point, but this is not a defibrillator application. It's not a communications hub application.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stroudberg.
Yeah, you make your point very well, Councillor, but incorrectly, because the application is clear that this is for the installation of a multifunction communication hub, and the defibrillator is a bonus that we get afterwards. So it's not an application for a defibrillator. You're trying to paint it as though it's a defibrillator application dressed up as a hub. It's not. It's a hub, and someone's gone, aha, we can get something else on this, a defibrillator, which might be useful to the community. And unless I'm misreading this, this is very clear. It's an application for a multifunctional communication hub, including a defibrillator and an advertising display. It's not an application for a defibrillator. So we are not being misled. It's very clear what we're being asked to approve. Would you not agree?
I disagree completely, because I think you've fallen for the ruse that I pointed out. It is an advertising hoard. You asked me a question, so am I allowed to finish it?
Yeah, but you're not answering me. You keep telling me I'm falling for a ruse, and I'm telling you I'm not, because we're not being asked to propose a defibrillator.
In the officer's report, the word defibrillator comes first. So that's what I'm concerned about. It's selling something which is actually an advertising board first and foremost. One of the things that I'm sorry that the officer didn't say, he described one side of the screen. The other side is continuous rolling adverts, changing not more often than every 10 seconds. So you've got a huge advertising board on one side. On the other side, you've got adverts facing the phone section, so that anybody who does use the phone, and I suggest it's very rare because we've all got phones in our pockets, we all have chargers and whatever else, there's a second advertising section that is just aimed at the person using the phone. It is quite clearly an advertising hub. They've tucked on a communications section and a defibrillator to make it attractive to planning committees and officers.
Yeah, Councillor Luki.
Can you tell us what are the disbenefits of this compared of this proposal compared to similar existing sites? You cited the one down there, down outside the former Empire House. What are the disbenefits of this one compared to the others?
Well, you'll hear more from residents about the risks to them. I think their points should be taken very seriously. It is an unattractive feature just opposite a conservation area. It couldn't be on the other side of the road, and it is a shame in a way that the whole of the high road isn't a conservation area, and most of it is further along, because it would not then fit. It's purely exploiting a bit of space. The disbenefits are that people don't like living with these. You should see the comments on the chiswickw4.com forum repeatedly coming up about the one at Empire House. It pops up out of the blue. At the moment, because there's hoardings there, which is another thing to think about, you can't get through easily. We had to ask the developers very kindly. They were obviously very willing to move it back, but those are the risks. It is an unattractive addition, and it, of course, is more street clutter, which is against Hounslow's own policy on reducing street clutter. It's been plonked inconsiderately. There are some cycle racks, there's a tree, there's a post box, it's very ugly there, and this makes it more so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no other hands. Okay, thank you, Councillor Bidder. Can I now invite objectors, Graham Wheeler and Mike Orkin? It's only one, yeah? Okay, you got 5 minutes. Yeah, you got 5 minutes. Again, we'll let you know when 30 seconds left. Yeah.
Hello all, hope you're good. So I live at 532 Chiswick High Road, and I'm part of the resident association in there. So I'm speaking on behalf of a number of the residents in the block of flats. But that flat has got 40 flats with 62 car parking spaces. So a lot of them have emailed you directly with their kind of concerns, but I really want to focus on three major concerns. So if we first take the road traffic safety, that only really reviews mitigation of drivers being distracted and eastbound. And I find it very interesting that if it was rejected before and overruled, there's no mention in the report of our exiting being mitigated on. So I find that's an interesting addition from what I was just saying. But what I've done is created some pictures. I'm not very good at Photoshop, but that's probably smaller than what the sign is. This picture that you see here is as I drive out to the car park. There's a car park in the lay-by, and it's actually a small car. Normally they're larger cars, so you won't be able to see. So I will not be able to see anything coming down the high road, a bicycle, a bus, or a car. And the next picture, if that's okay, is me as I get to the junction. Now, this is a telling picture for me because actually it's very clear. I cannot see anything coming. And if I actually sort of assess the impact from my perspective, this is really the definition of a bad situation. I have on one side a mitigated, that does not mean exonerated, distraction method from people coming one way from the sign. And I am unable to see people turning. So that is really bringing both sides in a very poor situation to have a collision on that high road. So that is really what I'm kind of focusing on when it comes to that element of safety. That is my main concern. But I do want to actually go on to the next concern, which is sound and light objections. And it's something that's probably not been pulled up as much. So actually, light is a problem. It is a mainly residential area as described, and there's actually ground floor flats, 4 of them with windows facing out towards the sign. So that's 24 hours a day light coming in. But I'm more concerned about the sound. I don't know if you've ever walked down the high street, the one that Councillor Joe showed you, I took a measurement of. It's actually a very loud thing because it creates active cooling. It has fans inside it because it's a display advertising. They want to keep it cooling. So I used a decibel meter and I used exactly the same time of day. The only difference in time is me walking from one site to the other. And I measured it twice to make sure I was slightly scientific, although it's not 100%. It's actually 20 dBs louder at the sign exhaust than it is at my site. And just for your reference, 20 dBs is a logarithmic scale. So that's 100 times louder at the exhaust than actually taking a measurement from the flat. So for me, the biggest concern is actually noise, because actually 20 dBs, is about the average office sort of situation. What you 70 dB, is about an average office situation. So I'm not saying it is a health and safety issue. I'm saying, would you like someone sitting outside your house at night talking through the night in the summer months where you might want the windows open, keeping you awake? Because that's what this sign will be doing to us in our local area. So that's one of the main concerns that I'm worried about. The next one really is about that focusing on the public service. And it's something that was brought up, mobile phone communication hubs or defibrillators. When we look at it, if you look to the last slide, I've added in 2 extra signs, which are the bus stops, very short walk away, in fact, visible from that location. I don't believe we are a Grand Prix circuit where we need hoardings every so often that will keep reminding people about the local authority information. And also, these are better locations for defibrillators and communication hubs because they already are street furniture there. So really, that is my main focus on those 3 things. And I'd like to come back to the fact that the hoarding was actually approved before, because honestly, everyone in the block never received anything in 2008 about the previous hoarding. So we weren't able to reject it. So they're my last closing points of the application. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions for the objector? No? Councillor Luki?
Go on then.
Oh, yeah, can you give me some questions?
No, all right, I'll give you a question.
I've never done it
All right,
before.
I'll
This
give
is
you a
good.
question. Yeah, you get your money's worth, sir.
Thank you.
Just on that last point, I raised it earlier about a question on the similar, but when were you? Did you not receive? Nobody in your block receive information or a notice for the first application back in 28, was it 2018? Back in 2018?
No. And even this application.
Nor this application.
This application only found out due to the W4 website. And when I found out, I objected from the W4 website.
Okay, all right, and so you wouldn't have heard about the appeal because
Of
if you
course
had
not.
if you had all right, is that all right? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
can I-
Okay,
I'm happy
all
with
right.
that.
I'm going to
I've
more
got one
questions for you. I mean, now, the other thing is though, I mean, have you noticed these contraptions elsewhere apart from?
Yeah,
London
the
Council?
reason that I
Yeah, go
took
on.
for was the one that Joe had the picture of, the
Right.
set where I took the 70 dB recording.
Right.
And that one is, to be honest, as Joe was saying, it's obtrusive. It's right in the middle of high road. I was talking to my neighbour yesterday, and he was talking how he almost got curtailed by someone on a Lime bike coming down the other road, unsighted. He was walking around it because you have to make a diversion on the pavement, and almost got curtailed. So.
And is that a communication hub? Can you charge your phone from that? Is that? Do you know about that? You don't know, do you?
Wouldn't
Yeah,
have a
yeah, yeah.
clue.
Okay,
To be honest,
all right,
I don't think
okay.
anyone would charge their phone in a communication hub, but
Yeah.
that's obviously a benefit.
Maybe, maybe. I'm not going to say he's got a drug dealer here, but I know they do that. I've seen it happen. Okay, cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any more hands. Thank you. Yeah, right. Matthew, you want to come back on that? Or?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I can't check the consultation points about what happened in 2018. Obviously, we'll do that in hindsight. Notwithstanding that, the only things I'll add is that I probably don't need to say this, but we will need to be slightly wary about using Photoshop as a forming a basis for a decision. But notwithstanding that, I think we've all seen the plans. I think it's probably broadly reasonably accurate. We just can't quite get that position and distances right. So we need to have a little bit of caution about that. On the noise point, it's completely fair to say that we haven't got that in the report. All I would say is that it's a town centre location, and vehicular traffic is commonly accepted as being 70 decibels, and this is 60, measured at 64, so it's measured as quieter as the vehicle traffic passing. So that, again, you may have problems if you're going to use that as a reason for refusal. Notwithstanding that, I acknowledge it wasn't assessed within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
You were nodding your head about the decibel noise. What was the number you were saying? 70. Do you mind, Chair? Because Matthew quoted a different figure. Sorry, Matthew.
Yeah. Sorry, it's 70 decibels. So it's 68 if you want to be precise on the pictures. But
Okay.
yeah.
What you said, Matthew, didn't it? That's
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. It's about this normal size of an office
fine, thank
in a location in a residential area.
Right.
I'm just looking at the slides. I read 64.2 and 64.8. Is that, sorry, I can get the slides back up. Is that okay? I'm slightly different. I mean, 64 is still, I appreciate, quite noisy, but the reading is 64.2 and 64.8. I just want to be.
Yeah, to
Is
be
that
honest,
okay?
that's as good as I could take a photograph of it, but it would be around that. You can actually see the graph line if you look at the pictures, where it actually gives you. So you see the 64, but you see the graph on the pictures.
quite right,
So
sorry,
you,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can actually see it slightly picking up within those periods. So I would say that it would probably exceed the 64.8.
Yeah, it says very clearly 64.8 there. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. It's open for debate. Anybody?
I'd just like to understand, you know, I know I do, you know, I do understand. I know it's difficult for me. I do understand Councillor Biddulph's points with regards to the defibrillator, and I think I mentioned that earlier on myself. But in terms of the actual function of this, if it was a straight advertising sign, would we approve it? Without the telecommunications, as I said, we've got one down on London Road in Isleworth in the ward. It's a collection point for fly tip, or it's a place where people fly tip, and that having a lay-by nearby, you're more likely to get fly tip there. It's also got a little charging point there, which which I'm not going to mention any names or show you any pictures of people people hanging about there and doing deals in illegal substances, and it's very close to Thornbury Park. I think this is something that we might need to consider if we are going to approve it, and also that same policy, that same ability for a local authority to refuse permission of its impact on its detrimental impact on local amenity, which I think on the telecommunication mast, because I think I know about this, having made representations on behalf of residents before and had them refused, that we need to consider if this is a right place, which is in really ostensibly a residential area. Empire House, all right, it's going to get flats above it, but that's not really a residential area. It's a shopping area. This isn't a shopping area. I know you got Majestic down the road, and you got the vets down there as well, and the bike shop. But yeah, can we really consider that? I don't think I'll be happy with this in my ward. Given my experience and residents and shopkeepers' experiences down there on London Road, between the fire station and the Milford Arms, where a lot of fly tipping takes place.
Thank you. Councillor Lal?
Yeah, Chair, I'm going to firstly take on board what Councillor Lukey said about defibrillators being available in various areas in vicinity of this particular location, to be verified or not, but it looks like defibrillators are available. But coming back to rationale behind this, the officers mentioned that we should not take the sight lines as shown to us as gospel, but also it's incumbent on our highways officers, transport section to also put their views forward as to how bad those sight lines are. And in terms of the sight lines, you've all seen that there's a large tree there. So we can split hairs. Okay, the tree's causing the obstruction anyway, and putting a sign there is probably adding to the obstruction. So in that sense, it's probably a bad location. In terms of street clutter, I've said it already once, and I'll say it again. Yeah, my gut feeling, I go along with the policy that we had ages ago. I don't know what's happened to it, but the introduction of further pieces of kit on pavements for obvious reasons is generally, I don't seem to think it's a good idea. We've also heard from the objector that it's not himself. He's representing Residents Association, and I would like to assume that the view is very much shared by the whole Residents Association and not just a singular view. And the last point in regard to the sound and light pollution, I was totally unaware until he mentioned it about the light and also the sound. And again, it's very, very close to being a naughty piece of kit. Having said that, also, we all know in our own wards, when you have certain locations, they do sometimes tend to attract fly tipping. I'm not saying this would, but there's always the argument that it could do. But generally, my gut feeling, looking at all these issues, it's a good piece of kit, but it's in the wrong location. I'll leave it there for the time being.
Thank you. Councillor Bhatti first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Lal. When I saw the picture that was shown by the objector sitting in the car, there are bollards. I think there is a bench there. There are trees, lines of trees, bus stop, and you put a board. Obviously, the person coming out, that's obscured. The view would be obscured. I personally, if I'm allowed to, I'll propose refusal on the grounds of noise and all the other things to go with it.
What I was going to say about it, there's been quite a few grounds for not having it, and they aren't the most attractive of things, probably. But I think we're faced with I'm just looking at it now, that the reality is that it's been appealed, it wanted to be, all that's going to happen if we refuse this, it's going to be appealed again, and then we'll be back here. We're just kicking this can down the road. It comes back to the issue that you've got to have a rock solid planning objection to it. And everything we're hearing is slightly, I'm afraid, and regrettably, slightly emotive. Some of them are beyond emotive. I mean, clearly that's a massively wide pavement. I know it extremely well. Whether it adds or detracts from the area, whether the defibrillator is a smoke screen, the fact is this, we can refuse it, but it's going to be appealed, and it's going to be upheld at appeal again, because you can just see that from reading the history of it and what's been said by officers. So we've made one bizarre decision today. Let's not do two.
Thank you. Okay, it's been proposed for refusal. Is there a seconder for that? Okay. Sorry.
Can we be clear about the reasons for refusal? And as Councillor said, you do have a strong appeal decision. And can I suggest it's the distinction between that application and this application, which I suggest is fairly marginal as regards the difference and going against that, but also rightly said about a potential cost application. I believe they did make a cost application on the last occasion, which was refused, but now they have the support of an inspector's appeal decision. But the starting point is about the strong reasons.
I've got the message. It's very eloquent, Jimmy. Thank you.
Sorry, Jimmy, can you clarify what you mean by cost application?
Well, by the applicant.
Yeah, so
Who
they
appeals.
they applied for costs as part of the appeal, suggesting that our decision was unreasonable. The inspector found that it was the cost application was refused. They disagreed with our decision, but they did not believe that our decision was sufficiently irrational as to warrant costs applications.
So is the suggestion that if we refuse it again and it goes to appeal again, we'll have to pay the legal costs?
There's a much higher risk this time around because there's an additional material consideration this time, which is the previous appeal decision.
What
Yeah.
what are the legal costs likely to be?
I mean, so it's the cost of the appellant writing an appeal statement. So
The possible future costs shouldn't inform the decision around the planning merits of the application in front of you. What Jimmy and Matthew have described is correct, in that if this were refused, there's a chance it could go to appeal. There could be an application for costs. Costs could be awarded, but that's all supposition. We don't know what that would be, and it shouldn't inform your decision on the material planning considerations around the application that's in front of you.
Then why is Jimmy telling?
Suggestion that there wasn't a cost application. I was saying there was, but maybe you may make a good point that I might have overstepped the mark. What Vincent just said is 100% correct. Yeah, but you need to take into it in the round as regards.
Okay, we're still asking for reasons. Yeah, go on.
And what is a material planning consideration is that there's that previous appeal decision. So that is of material, that's got material weight and should be form part of your decision, that there's a previous appeal decision for an application that was similar to what's being put forward this time round. Not the same, but similar.
Right, we're still waiting for a reason. Go on. Are you going to propose something? Yeah, go on. Use your microphone, please.
I'm trying. Thank you. Sorry, I'm nervous standing here. I want to make a very powerful case here. Councillor Stratto talked about it's simply an advertising and stuff. This is a huge advert. It's there solely to advertise. And what we've got tonight, a local councillor, and I thought a very sensible, mature presentation by a local. It's a cry for help, really. These things are a bloody intrusion. The one that we passed a photograph around, I apologise for swearing, it's right in the middle of a road. Who would fit an advert right in the middle of the curb where you have to squeeze to go by? That's the concern I've got. I understand the risk of losing on appeal. But what we've got here, in essence, in my view, is a public nuisance. If people are not being able to sleep because of the sign, we now hear about noise. Noise is the bane of my life. Air conditioning units, all that buzz. And I know that part of the road. It's deceptive, the photograph, because as Councillor Biddulph says, there's a large footfall there during the day. So I think regardless of the potential risk of appeal, we need to put a marker down that we're not happy with the noise, the light, the excessive size, and the overall public nuisance, and let the inspector decide on that basis.
Okay. Just a moment, yeah. Is that acceptable, Matthew, the reason? Go tell me.
So what Councillor Todd has put forward is new considerations that didn't form part of the previous appeal. So yes, noise is a planning consideration. Light is a planning consideration. We do have conditions in here which we use consistently in terms of the illumination levels over light. So you can mitigate that through conditions. And then public nuisance is a planning issue. It's not a particularly strong one. I mean, if an inspector sees this, you tend to be suggested that they would say that it's up to the local planning authority, the local authority to prevent fly tipping. I don't think it's a particularly good one, but designing out crime is a planning issue. We've used it before. So I've heard noise impacts, light impacts, designing out crime. What's also been mentioned has been impact on the street scene. We've had that argument, discussion, debate before with the planning inspectorate, and also impact on the highways network. Again, we've had that debate with the planning inspectorate as well. Both failed. Broadly same policies as before. So yes, our advice is that it's unlikely to concede on these grounds, but obviously, sorry, up to yourselves.
Councillor Lal, you want to say something?
I lost my train of thought, but yeah, I mean, staying on the same vein, I hear what you said about the previous application being the appeal consideration that needs to be taken into account by this committee. Well, when the decision was made by the previous planning committee, I was not on it. I'm on this planning committee, and based on what I've heard, I take on board what you're saying about the previous appeal. I've taken on board. I've considered it, but it doesn't warrant the weight that you're attaching to it. What I do attach a weight to is the rationale behind what we've heard today, what I've heard today regarding the sight lines, about street clutter, about the light pollution, and on that basis alone, I think it warrants refusal.
Tony, you want to add on to that?
Yeah. Look, we get this often. We get this often at planning committee. We get the fear of if we reject, it's going to go to an inspector, and it's going to and we're going to lose an appeal. We look at the document that we've got on the addendum. We don't always lose. We often win. Okay, more often than not. So this is often something that we're and why we have to throughout debate when we mention issues of why we should refuse things, we get it thrown back at us. What are you refusing it on? So if that's just a marker on that. The other thing is, I take it this previous application, which was refused, did not come to committee. That was as most of these things are done. They're done delegated. They're done delegated by the department. That's fair enough, because a lot of these things are delegated. We get less than 1% coming to committee anyway. But this has come to committee because it was called in. What we've also got now, I can't remember how many people made representations on this. What we have got now, if we do refuse it, then it's out in the open again, and that will give the people here, whether it gets heard or not, in public.
We're asking for planning reason.
Well, I have given planning reasons. I gave them in the debate, and I gave them in terms of amenity, particularly, and that fits in. But what I'm saying is, these people will get an opportunity if it does get called in, if it does get appealed. These people have the opportunity to contribute to that, whether it's in person or whether it's written. And that's what didn't happen last time.
Thank you. Okay, so proposed and seconded for refusal, yeah?
I didn't quite catch the specific reasons, if that's okay. So there's a lot of debate about the reasons. They weren't refined. Well, they weren't refined to us as the reasons for refusal. They were discussed. They weren't motioned.
Go on then. The reason, yeah. Can you add the reasons with the proposal? Councillor, it's your proposal. Go on.
Chair, I'll propose refusal on the following grounds. Okay, so I'm not.
Yeah, fine.
If it helps.
Yeah. Go on.
So The rationale for refusal is that the highways issue regarding sight lines, health and safety issues there, street clutter. I'm trying to think of the wording that officers usually use in their reports, in their policies. That
I can help you. It's all right if you want.
yeah,
me to.
yeah. There's specific wording that you use on that, so it's contrary to our policies on allowing further clutter on the
Yeah, there was noise and light.
And the issue regarding the sound and light pollution, I think, is very valid regarding the residents association and then people living adjacent to that site, and designing out crime in terms of it's a magnet for fly tipping, etc., and nuisance, etc. That's done. Is that enough, Matthew?
Yeah, 5 reasons for refusal.
Okay, okay, we'll take a vote on that. Refusal, approve, sorry, it's been seconded as well. So I'll take a vote on the refusal, please. Go on. Hands up for that, and hands up properly, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, yeah? Okay. Against? Abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So it's been rejected. Okay. Next one is item 7. No, sorry, item 6 first. You all see in your report, and it says this is for noting. I hope everybody had a look at that. Noted. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the director. I note that we're the 31st out of 33 boroughs for a very poor approval rate, decision to grant. Would you like to comment on that? Yeah, London average is 80% and yours is only 68, which implies that we might be being a bit tough on our planning decisions.
I think that just reflects the statistics as they are at the moment. So that's on the applications that have been received. They're the statistics as it stands around what we've approved and what we've rejected. But yeah, it says it how it is. Thank you very much for reading it.
Okay, thank you. So it's noted. Yeah. Okay, item 7, I not been told of any other business. The next meeting is the 8th of June, and we close the meeting 5 to 10. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you. Thank you. There we go.